Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to...
Shut up. Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today and always I'm joined by my good friend, Jason Six Names, out of Bridgewater, Virginia.
I thought you were going to go with Jason 6 centimeters.
No, Jason Six Names, which I think for today's episode just really makes sense.
I have been thinking, to be honest with you, about the Jason 3 names, and I was thinking, how are we counting them? Because it's Jason Neil Johnston Yellen, but the Johnston Yellen is hyphenated. Are we counting Johnston Yellen as one name and Neil as one name, or are we counting Johnston Yellen as two names and we're not counting Neil at all?
No, I don't think we're counting Neil at all. It's Jason Johnston Yellen.
Okay, so that's the Jason 3 names.
Yeah, so 6 names today. Because you got a double.
My
for
kid
proof.
is Kai 4 names, so here we are.
Is he Kai 4 names?
He is. Anyway, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
I'll say it's good to be here.
It is good to be here. It's a Sunday. I have a little mezcal in my glass. Actually, I don't have mezcal in my glass, Jason. You know what I have? I have mezcal in my jicara, which was gifted to me and one gifted to you by listener David Feldner.
And it is absolutely beautiful. Regular listeners will remember it being brought up on the podcast. Also, regular listeners know that Guildford is where we always say samples go to die, but apparently gifts as well. So whenever this came in, I just received it this past week.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen you once since it came in, twice since it came in.
Yeah, I feel like you're really putting a dig on me.
Dig on or dig with? Dig by?
Dig by. Is it a dig on? With? By?
Which mezcal did you pop into your jicara?
So I did something interesting. I bought... So I think I mentioned...
He does say so himself.
I've told you this before, and I think I've told the listeners. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it, but if I did, you get to hear it again. And if I haven't, Habali has been my favorite, single variety of agave when it comes to mezcal. And I like the Habali because regardless of who produces their mezcal using that agave, I always get this sort of this cucumber soda note, this fresh, sweet, vegetal kind of thing going on, and I absolutely love it. And so I got this bottle of Habali produced by Ray Campero, whom I also love, one of my favorite producers. So I was excited, and I purchased it. I opened it, and I don't love it.
Oh,
I actually returned to it.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, I returned to it recently because Christopher Sebastian Seabass reached out, and he was interested in some recommendations of mezcals, and I think I sent him a picture of this one. And then I went back and tasted it, and I'm regretting having sent him that picture. But I'm hoping trying this Habali in this jicara will make me enjoy the Habali. So far, I can tell you. So far, on the nose, it's really. I'm getting this intense, almost nail polish remover note, which I am not loving at all. So
that's not normal with Habali.
Yeah, no, I know. It is 48.9%, and this one it was produced in November 2017. And the lot is DS008B-J.
Well, I went in a very different direction from you then, because as regular listeners of the podcast know, I am a huge fan of Papa Diablo and their ensemble that I can only get at the Whiskey Exchange.
Do you know
ensemble.
It's pronounced ensemble.
I can only get it at the Whiskey Exchange, and I have to say, I passionately love that ensemble. See, having it in this gourd, this carved out gourd, I could just pound this. And you mentioned strength a moment ago. This Papa Diablo is 47.5%. And I can see why a lot of mezcals come in at 40% alcohol. Because seeing drinking it from a traditional vessel, gosh, I really could consume a lot of these in an afternoon.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I will tell you, after tasting it, so across the palate, that's where the cucumber soda kicks in. There's cucumber soda. There's even a little bit of... do you remember when we did the tasting with Elijah and Jess, and there was that Maya Lane mezcal that had the pine needle note, right? The Christmas wreath note, getting a little bit of that, like a little Douglas fir going on in here. And now, returning to the nose, it's fresh now. It's bright. There's a lot of green things happening, a lot of vegetal things happening, which I really like. And I'm not getting that nail polish remover. So yeah, this I was nervous after the first nose, but then I tasted, and in returning to the nose, it's made me a believer. It's made me like a mezcal that I haven't loved.
How does one clean their Hikara? Does the
dry.
mezcal that we're consuming just simply keep it clean?
Yep, keeps it clean. I mean, it's high octane stuff, right? Mine's 48.9. So
one doesn't put a Hikara in the top of the dishwasher.
One does not simply walk into your kitchen and put a Hikara in the dishwasher. Everybody knows that famous line from Lord of the Rings.
Everybody knows. Are you getting the same kind of response as me, where you could just pound it? You could just make it disappear early and often?
That's a good question. So I'm tasting a mezcal that I didn't love, so I'm busy just exploring it. Could I just pound the hell out of it?
Hashtag, please drink responsibly.
I bet you if I put a familiar mezcal in here, then I would. But right now, I don't have that mindset of just having a sessionable mezcal. I think part of it is your mindset. I think you're just relaxed.
And I was just about to bring this up. I was going to say, to be honest with you, of an evening, of an afternoon, I am more likely to reach for a mezcal cocktail than I am to reach for a mezcal. If I'm actually going to sit down and pour something, sit with it, consider it, I'm probably going to reach for a whiskey, and probably I'm going to reach for a single malt because it's my first true love. But sitting here with you, sitting in the presence of our listeners, I am thoroughly enjoying having a mezcal in my glass. I'm thoroughly enjoying listening to you talk about Habali, talking about the ensemble. And again, if you haven't heard me mention Papa Diablo before, the ensemble is Espadin, Bicuiche, Madre Cuiche, and Mexicano. And Mexicano is a varietal that I thoroughly enjoy. And I've got a Rey Campero Mexicano that is so delightfully spicy. To be honest with you, I'm going to pour it after I finish this Papa Diablo.
Well, there you go. You know what? I'm going to pour after this. There's a Clonde ensemble, but
nice.
It's an ensemble of agave and sotol. So that will be interesting. That'll be my next pour.
I'm going to circle back just for a second here. When I was talking about the mezcal cocktail a moment ago, I've been making what I like to call my Gringroni. And I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but here we are at the tail end of July, and it's well worth mentioning again. And it fits with what I'm drinking today, which is I take an ounce of mezcal, an ounce of Campari, and an ounce of freshly squeezed lime juice. and I just combine them in a tumbler full of ice, and I add 8 to 10 drops of a Japanese chili lime bitters that I have from 1821, which is a bitters company in Atlanta, Georgia that I really, really like. Mm-hmm. And I've used Vida in my cocktail, and that's my go-to. That's easy peasy, straightforward summer deliciousness. And then I had a mezcal that a rep had given me at a festival when we were both pouring at tables and what have you. And it was all right. It didn't blow me away. It wasn't anything special. But I got through the bottle. And now, this summer, I've been making my Gringronis from Papa Diablo Espadin. And I poured the Espadin for you, and we're both such huge fans of the ensemble. But we tried the Espadin, and it's good. It's a fine little Espadin.
Yeah, it's great. Nothing to write home about, but quaffable.
See, using it in the Gringroni, it's making the best Gringronis I've had. They are so good. And oh my goodness, sitting on my back deck of an evening after a day's work before I make dinner, drinking, I should say throwing back one of these Papa Diablo Espadin Gringronis. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So just as we're on this Papa Diablo thread, and you and I had that Espadin before, I just wanted to share with you where I'm really enjoying it. And when I'm ordering my Papa Diablos from the Whiskey Exchange, I'm going to bring in another Espadin when I didn't think that was going to be the case.
So it's interesting that you're tying. Is the name of the cocktail a name that you came up with, or are you copying a recipe that? Okay.
No, this is just a recipe I started making and a name that I gave it.
So I find it an interesting name because when it comes to a Negroni, you've got 3 equal parts Campari, gin, usually just a London Dry, and then a sweet vermouth, right? With a little orange twist. But in this case, you're taking 2 of the elements out. You're taking out the gin, you're taking out the vermouth, and you're replacing it with mezcal and lime juice. But so you're not. So my point is, you're actually getting the drink a bit closer to like a mezcal margarita, but instead of using triple sec, you're using Campari and then a few dashes of bitters. So I think as fun as your name is, I think you may have to change it up to like a Gringrita or something.
Yeah, that's not happening. But the thing for me with a Negroni is you asked me to think about the number one component of a Negroni, and I'm going to say Campari.
Yes, of course.
And so for me, it's the Campari relationship. But then, and I've said this in the podcast, I don't make a lot of cocktails, but the cocktails that I do make, I thoroughly enjoy. I make them a lot, and I tend to batch them, and I store them in bottles in my refrigerator. And so when I hear 3 equal parts, that includes Campari in a Negroni. That's what I was riffing off of. Okay. That's where I was sitting having the Negroni thinking, well, where else could I take this? The gin, where you just replace it with a mezcal. Boom, there's one in, one out. Easy peasy. Yep. Obviously taking a sweet vermouth and turning that into lime juice, you've really turned that around 180 degrees.
And so adding an equal part of lime juice, does the cocktail at any point pucker your asshole with its tartness?
Absolutely. But I wouldn't be drinking if it didn't. But what I love about Campari is that as Campari dilutes, it moves from bitter to sweet.
Yes, it does. That is true.
And so as one sits in the company of the Gringroni, the sweetness starts to balance out that line. But, and this is why I like it as much as I do, at the end of a work day, before making dinner, I want something to wake me up, to brighten me up, to give me that second wind for dinner time into evening before, heading off to bed. And so sitting out my deck in the sun under the umbrella, because, obviously I have Scottish skin. I'm in the shade, 50 SPF umbrella above me. That's a bright, very warm situation.
Yeah.
And so having something nice and tart, that's a flavor profile that I really, really enjoy.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm more on the bitter and less on the tart. But I've made a Gringroni, but I think I've done it with components. I think I did it with the wrong mezcal, but I have a bottle of the Kikiriki Espadin.
Yes. Also a TWE.
Right, also a TWE one, and one that is just a great sort of any day, every day Espadin drinker. It's not going to rock your world, but right, it's a sessionable mezcal. But I'll give that a go in the Gringroni.
You know that old joke about there's a hole in my glass? Given that this is the first time we're using the Hikara, does it need to be treated? Because I feel like it has taken a portion of my mezcal before I could drink it.
So this is one thing that I think David Feldner had said in his little note to us. Said that which was basically enjoy the Hikara. It's the one drinking vessel that also drinks along with you. Right?
Yes, a thirsty little bugger.
It is, right? It is absorbing some of the mezcal. So listen, I'm about to grab another bottle of mezcal, but I'm glad that we brought up mezcal. And I'm glad we brought up mezcal because of our guest today, who's Bruce Russell, who in our previous conversations, or I should say, in most of the conversations we've had with Bruce, we end up finding ourselves talking about mezcal. He has a similar love
Correct.
And passion for the spirit that we do.
Exactly. And also, to what we'd started talking about earlier about that camaraderie, the company, and hanging out with him and drinking, bourbons, but also drinking mezcal with him.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's a great excuse to pour some fun things.
Yeah.
I'm actually, now that we're talking about it, I'm actually going to pour what I took to Kentucky to pour for him and Anne Ryan Alves at Justin's House of Bourbon. And you have a bottle of this.
I do. What was the agave again? Oh, hold on. He walked away.
Sorry, my mezcal shelf is now across my office. It's not just behind me anymore.
So my bottle's downstairs, so I'll have to run and get it. But what was the... I remember it was de mojo, which means the agave had gotten a bit moldy. Yeah. But what was the actual agave itself?
It is Quiche, Karwinski to be precise.
Karwinski, which is
it's a combination of wild and semi-cultivated Quiche, a Karwinski.
Okay. All right. Give me 1 second, Jason. I'm going to go grab my bottle.
Yeah, this Hikara is now, it's not quite dry, but it's on its way to being dry. Oh, shit. Holy fucking shit. Oh, that's a horse of a different color.
Oh, really?
It is until the finish, and it's very recognizable in the finish. But holy moly, that first drink of it, that's not like drinking it from a spade ram.
That's interesting. Ooh. So now that I have my bottle, what should I expect tasting this Quiche de Mojo?
Oh, I'm not going to lead the witness. I'm going to leave you to explore it for yourself.
Manischewitz. So
I will say, though, by the time it gets to the finish, it gets very tropical, but also very grassy, very fresh.
Would you say that this is a mezcal for Isla lovers? Not because it's smoky, but because there's a general funkiness to it?
Not in particular, no.
All right.
I'm afraid to spend time talking because I'm watching my Hikara drink it.
So how about this? How about you and I sit back, listen to our conversation with Bruce, and enjoy our mezcal. However, before we do, I need to tell the listeners something. The way this interview starts is kind of unusual because you and I had gotten done with Bruce selecting some casks, right? We picked a 12-year-old and then an 8-year-old. And so the 8-year-old is from a warehouse we've not picked before, and we'll release more details about our picks at a later date. But what was interesting...
Isn't it 9?
No, it's 8. It's currently 8. It'll be 9 in like October or something.
Oh, okay, that's the part.
And so we had just gotten done selecting these two casks, and then we're just sitting outside in front of the warehouse, just having a conversation, having a whiskey conversation. And I said, you know what? Hold on, let me grab the mics. And then I mic'd us all up, and the conversation just sort of keeps going. Right? There's no real like, hey, Bruce, so welcome back to the podcast kind of a thing. The conversation just sort of picks up. And so I just want to let our listeners know that once we go over, you're actually hearing the conversation maybe 45 minutes into it. But there's also I know we recorded over an hour and 45 minutes of a conversation. How much gets in at the end? I haven't edited that part yet, so we'll see. But it was a long and wonderful, absolutely wonderful conversation with Bruce about bourbon and about single barrel picks and about, COVID issues and things like that. Like we really ran the gamut as far as the conversation went.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me in the moment. And one of the things we're often most proud about with our interviews is that they're just chats. They're not Q&A sessions. It's just people hanging out. But there's often a direction and there's often aspects we want to get to. In having somebody on the podcast for a second time, and in those rare occasions we've had somebody back for a third time or even a fourth time, it's even more conversational than the first time. And that was my recollection of this conversation, was just us chatting.
It was just us chatting. Yeah, I mean, of course you're asking questions, but you ask questions in normal conversations, right? It was just a conversation, and it was such a pleasure meeting Bruce a few years back, and then you have a conversation, then you have some drinks together, then you hang out again, you have another conversation. And it's just like, three buddies getting together to talk about whiskey, which was really nice.
Well, and as much as we're there for Wild Turkey Bourbon, he's the Russell's Rye guy,
that
right?
Is. Yeah.
But as you mentioned a moment ago, we're also, not in this portion of the interview, but in hanging out with him, we're talking mezcal, we're talking rum. Like there's a whole world of spirits that we discuss in any time we're hanging out with them, and I always enjoy and appreciate that little kind of difference maker in people that we hang out with, because it just adds to the fun. It's all just fun.
Yep, agreed. So let's hand it over to Bruce. Then when we come back, we'll have a bit of news to share. We actually got a Facebook message that I want to read to people as well. And who knows what other surprises may be lying on the other side of this interview.
After I've listened to a lot of your all stuff before, and one thing I really like about most of the stuff you all do is that you all are friendly enough with the people you interview that they tell, like, there's good stories and they tell probably a little more than they normally would. But I know, because I've done some of these with you all, there's a few more minutes of some other stuff that probably didn't make it. It's the real good stuff. You can always kind of tell, like, oh, he was feeling good during that interview. I bet he said something.
There is actually we have maybe 10 minutes with you where we're just tasting mezcal together.
Oh yeah,
And it's the mezcal that we put in a wild turkey barrel. And it was just that conversation, and we'd said, all right, let's put that in a podcast. I don't think we ever did.
Yeah, we haven't done a mezcal focused thing
No.
that we were intending, but we always have plans.
I don't know. One of my childhood friends, Ryan, had got him a bottle of that, and I think he might have got the bottle from you.
He did get the bottle for me. Yep.
And my buddy is so ecstatic. He loves it. He's in love with that stuff. He just discovered mezcal though here in the past year or two, and that's become his new thing. But I owe that buddy a lot of love. Shouts out to Clay, high school buddy of mine, who now lives in Louisville, where I live, and he was the first one in my friend group that recognized that what Jimmy and Dad did was like super cool, and that the whiskey was better than average.
Yeah.
So of course we were all 21 when we all started to drink whiskey.
I love the disclaimer up front.
Yo,
It's
yeah.
really good.
Should we add in hashtag please drink responsibly?
Hashtag drink responsibly, hashtag Campari safe. And at an earlier age than the rest of us, when we were all, what I told you all, we were trying to drink handles of Heaven Hill, White Label 6-year-old Bonded. Or, I mean, I grew up in Lawrenceburg, so people here were drinking what they called Irk and Jerk and Mountain Dew, E&J Brandy, or Mad Dog, and like that's what a lot of the younger people were drinking.
Yeah.
And Clay was like, "Your dad makes rare breed. What are you doing? Stop drinking Kentucky Gentleman with Coke. He makes rare breed. That 101 is good." We're like, "Shut up, Clay." As we're drinking Boone's Farm or whatever it was, peach schnapps, whatever. As a young consumer of alcohol, it just doesn't taste like alcohol, so you think it's good. No, he knew, and he has like a bottle. I think we gave him for his graduation, and another bottle for his wedding that he's just kind of kept. And always one of my dad's favorite buddies, not only because he's friends with his mom and stuff, they grew up together, but he always was like, yeah, he knows what's up.
There's always this thing, I always hear this pushback on wild turkey. And the pushback is, that's what my dad drank.
Yeah.
That's what my grandfather drank. For you, was there pushback on it? Like, that's what my dad made. That's what my grandfather made. Like
a little bit, and not as the same type of thing. Like, because I think a little bit of that comes from, and I've heard that a lot, not from my generation, but the generation right before me, and then Dad's generation, the baby boomers. You hear a lot from them, and was it Gen X in between me and the baby boomers?
Yeah, that's us.
That's you all.
Yeah.
That I don't want to drink what my dad drank.
Yeah.
That's changed a little bit, I think, with millennials and Gen Z folks. It was different for me. I didn't want to drink it, not because that's like what they did. It's just what they did was kind of just like boring. It's what everybody does in Lawrenceburg. Everybody works at distilleries. or you work for, a Florida Tile, or you make the buttons at the factory, or what. You're working at one of the factories around here, and there's nothing really different between, to me at that time, like, oh, it's just whiskey. Who cares? It's what everybody in Lawrenceburg does. It just wasn't a big deal. But I never only drank beer or vodka or whatever because that's what Dad drinks and I'm going to be a rebel.
Yeah.
Nah. And pretty early on, like probably 16 or 17, I wasn't drinking, of course.
Of course.
But
hashtag.
I knew that the whiskey stuff was cool because Jimmy was cool to me. And that's one thing that I've heard a lot of my peers say, or people much younger than me now. Which is crazy. There's people way younger than me that drink. But I'll see people in their early and mid 20s be like, no, my granddad is cool.
Yeah.
He drank. My dad is cool. He drinks good stuff. He wears cool clothes. He has nice boots.
Yeah.
I want to wear those things. I want a nice pair of Levi jeans and a nice pair of Red Wing boots and a nice Pendleton shirt and drink some Wild Turkey whiskey. It's like that stuff is cool again. And so I think for me, it wasn't that, but I can see why people kind of fell into that. Dad says a lot that his generation was a generation that they wanted to change everything.
Yeah.
You know, it was, and it was one of the first generations anti-everything.
Yeah.
Anti the man, anti the establishment, anti-war, you know, just anti-status quo. They realized that the world probably needed to change. And I've been lucky enough to grow up in a world that changed a lot, and everybody has it much better. And so we're able, I think, to just we're lucky enough to just look at stuff for what it is and say, oh, this whiskey's actually really good. Yeah. You know, I don't have to be concerned with what these other people are saying. This whiskey's awesome. I probably didn't really come around on it, though, until later than people think. I didn't really get into whiskey until I was probably in my mid-20s.
Okay.
Right before I started working for Wild Turkey did I start to realize how cool this stuff was.
So at the start, it was just a job with the family.
It was just a thing you do.
Yeah.
Because before that, I was giving tours and stuff here, helping out around as much as I could at the distillery, just doing whatever they asked me to do, which is mostly just sit in the visitor center because we'd give like 2 tours a day. But yeah, it was just a thing I drank because I had access to it. It wasn't, I didn't realize exactly how. I was under the assumption everybody made whiskey the way we did. Of course everybody distills at low proofs, touches the barrels at low proofs. Jimmy says that's the way you do it. Well, it turns out, no, they weren't.
My grandpa said.
Yeah. Because that's how I based everything off of is, well, you know, I call him Mimmy. So it'd be, Mimmy said this, and he said that's the way Elmer did it, and Booker did it, and Parker does it, and Lincoln did it. But then when I asked him why, because that's the way it is, okay, that's a good enough answer for me. And then it comes to find out that's not the way it is, that's what he thinks. And not to say that the other people were making bad whiskey, it was just different than what we did. And when I really started to get into wanting to learn about the tours and stuff, there was a young guy at the time, he's around my age, he might still work for Beam. This guy named Daniel Paulus who gave tours here, one of the best, if not the best tour guide we've ever had here. And he gave a shit about his job in a way that I didn't even.
Yeah.
And made me want to get into it. I mean, a little bit of it was just a competitive side to me. I grew up playing sports. I grew up being competitive from everything. I played football, basketball, I was on the academic team. I loved to compete, even if it's stuff I wasn't good at. Well, I would see him get all these reviews. You know, we used to have these note cards. He'd get these awesome reviews. Daniel's the best. I want that review. You know, I need to learn some more. And he was the person that really kind of gave me that first spark of I want to learn more. I actually want to be involved in this somehow. Yeah. And then I went to Dad and Jimmy and said, give me the real spiel. Give me the story. Tell me why we do the things we do. Not just how we do them, but why. And both of them said the exact same thing. Thank God. Because not that they were desperate for me to work here. It's just until I took it upon myself to want to learn, they weren't going to teach me.
Okay.
It was, we want to make sure you want to be a part of this. Growing up, they always told me and my brother, don't work here. Well, because they didn't like it. Yeah. They just wanted to make sure that's what we wanted to do. They never wanted us to be a junior. That's why when people call me or Dad, especially me a lot, Jimmy Jr., Dad doesn't like it that much.
Yeah.
Because you're Bruce. You're your own person.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So when you asked them the why, what was their why?
For Jimmy, a lot of it is because this is what I know how to do. Yeah. And what I mean by that, to start off, Dad is the current master distiller. Eddie Russell is our current master distiller. If you asked my grandfather Jimmy, Dad is one of 2 of our current master distillers. But my grandfather Jimmy's in his mid-80s, and he just doesn't. He does show. He was at work this morning, so I don't want to say he's not coming into work. He just doesn't have as much of a hands-on role as he would have probably in the past. And Dad's doing most of the master distilling work, which today is a lot different, I guess, than what Jimmy was doing. But he's only the 4th master distiller we've ever had since Wild Turkey started back in the mid-1800s. Yeah. The first guy was a Rippy who had started this distillery and brand. And then eventually, if anybody knows the history of the Rippy family, they sold and bought distilleries, and they were involved in a bunch of businesses and a bunch of random stuff. And I think that guy was one of the guys that started this. He went bankrupt 3 or 4 different times and had a bunch of different brands. Pretty interesting family. But after him, it was this guy named Bill Hughes. who then made our whiskey from before Prohibition.
Mm-hmm.
And then Prohibition happened. He came back as an old man.
Oh.
And he's the person that taught Jimmy. And so when Jimmy started in 54, Bill Hughes was the master distiller here. He's the only person that knew what we were doing. And this is the reason why Jimmy is our master distiller today. He got a pretty cushy job when he first started here. My grandmother was already working here. It probably had something to do with it. I think he was playing on like one of the semi-pro baseball teams that was attached to the company that owned it. So that probably helped. So he actually started off in the lab. He probably had the best job out of all of us in the beginning.
Yeah.
And Mr. Hughes just kind of fell in love with Jimmy. They fell in love with each other. Jimmy was this kind of sharp, inquisitive kid, which... according to other people, wasn't always the case back then. You just kind of did your job and shut up, and were happy with what you got paid. Well, Jimmy was one of those people that, why? That's how he's always been. Why? Can you tell me? Anybody that's ever talked to Jimmy knows he wants to talk to you about 2 hours about everything. About what you do for a living, where you live, what road's best to get there. He just likes to talk to people. And I'm sure he did the same thing with Mr. Hughes. And he started to teach Jimmy everything he knew. Mm-hmm. And he'd spend 6 months to a year in one job, 6 months to a year in another job. And Jimmy at one time thought he was going to get let go, or that they were trying to get rid of him, because that's what you do to union-style employees if you want to get rid of them, right? You put them around jobs till you find one they don't like, and then that's what he's got to work forever. And then he quits. Well, no, he was trying to teach him everything he did, and that was 54. I think 67. It's right around in there. It's like mid-60s.
Yeah.
Mr. Hughes passed away on the job here at the distillery.
On the job.
On the job. Had a stroke. I think it was a stroke. I don't think it was a heart attack. Here at the distillery.
Yeah.
And passed away. Well, Jimmy's the one he taught everything. So guess who your new master distiller is? It's that kid over there in the corner.
Okay.
And back then, you were more than just master distiller. I always crack up because Mimi will complain. There'll be somebody here at the distillery like, well, I'll get to you on Friday. And he'll be like, Friday? You can't just do what I need you to do right now, because... to him, he was master distiller and plant manager and head of HR and was the person who dealt with the union. And, there are people that do all these things now. There's dozens of people that do what he was doing by himself. And it was a much smaller operation, and it was not modern. So it's probably a less work than all those 12 jobs do today. But
sure,
that's what he was doing. He ran the entire thing by himself for a super long time, for decades, I think. And when he talks about the whiskey he makes, it's because that's what Mr. Hughes taught him. It's what he knows how to do.
Okay.
That's why we do it, because that's what I know how to do. And when I do it this way, it tastes good.
Right. Yeah.
Now, come to find out, he did know all the science, because when I first started here about 6 months in, he finally was like, okay, you've earned it. You've proven yourself to me that you care about it enough that you're really learning about what's going on here. So come in my office. I got something to give you. I was like, okay. And knowing Jimmy, I thought it was like a pour of whiskey, or he was going to tell me somebody said something nice about me and he was proud, that kind of thing. Typical grandpa stuff. No, he had 2 books handwritten from the time he started in 54. I think actually the first is in 57 when he actually started to write this stuff down, all the way into the early 60s. And they're notes about the science behind everything he's doing. Wow. This is how we distill, and these are the congeners and alcohols and things we pull off when we distill at this proof. This is the why. Our yeast strain gives us this kind of yield after these, this amount of time. If you leave it any longer, tertiary and more secondary fermentations than we set in. Yeah. So make sure to keep it. And it's funny because all the notes are written in the way he speaks. 72 to 80 hours, or bunk, or junk, or it'll be put it into the barrel 107, or no count, or you basically saying it's disgusting, it's no good, and everything in there is that kind of stuff. So when you ask him today, and he says I like 6 to 12-year-old whiskey, well, that's what he was taught back then. But he even meant it back then. It'll say stuff like that, best whiskey at 8 to 11 on distillery. Anything older is, and it'd be some weird off note. Anything younger is green and disgusting. And this beautiful handwritten stuff back from the 50s and 60s. Yeah. It's super interesting. And it's everything from super basic science, like how yeast works, to super detailed and specific science. This is how our yeast works. These are the exact things it gives us according to our chemical analysis. Yeah. And it's funny even seeing like some stuff that we take for granted today. It's like, how do you take proof? You know how we do it here? We have machines that do it. But back then, it's he had to do everything by hand, and those handwritten notes are really a gateway into everything we did. From here's how to pair up, your general employees. There wasn't even a union back then. I was going to say union work, but how to pair up union-like workers in groups to get the best out of them. To here's how long you can keep your grain before it starts to go bad. Beware of grain from these places because they'll try to, make their truck heavy. By they want you to think you're getting a certain amount of bushels, and when you actually weigh all the corn out, it's not. That kind of stuff from back then. It's super cool. I still have those notes. Every now and then when I'm feeling a certain way, I'll go back and read them.
Yeah.
Do you know if he was just writing those for himself?
Just for himself.
He wasn't in the back of his mind thinking...
He started in 54. It's 2021. He still hasn't taught anybody. I mean, that's the truth. He never once took my dad aside and taught him everything he knew. I'm the only person he's ever done anything like that with. And me, it was just kind of like, here's my books, learn it. Always been tough love type of guy. He's that way at home too. And it's always been, you're going to fall on your face. I'm not going to laugh at you. I'm going to pick you up and dust you off. And, smack you on your butt as you try again. But I'm going to let you fall down a few times. That's how he was with Dad. Yeah. He was way, way more patient and nice to me. But that's always just been kind of his thing, You're going to learn it on your own. Because a lot of the stuff he had to learn on his own. I mean, he had those notes, but he was around my age. He was in his mid-30s, early to mid-30s, and then had keys to this castle.
Amazing.
When I see a 30-something-year-old master distiller plant manager, I'm like, ooh, it's an awful young person to be running a place like that. Because I'm around that age,
Yeah.
And I'm not a master of anything. So to see all the stuff he did, it was pretty cool. But no, he was definitely writing it all for himself.
Okay.
All for himself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about your dad's why? What was your dad's why?
Dad's is a little bit different because Dad is not a person with like multiple chemistry degrees, but he's just always been inquisitive in a different way than Jimmy, I guess. He wants his whole thing would be like, well, why don't we just not use corn? Or have you ever tried using a square barrel?
Okay.
He's always wanted to poke and prod and fix and change.
Yeah.
And then Jimmy would be like, no. And then he would ask why, and Jimmy would say, because I say so. Well, then Dad would go and research himself why. Or would try it behind Jimmy's back, and then figure out, it's because it's disgusting when you do it that way. So his whys had a lot more of a actual scientific reason.
Yeah.
Well, we don't do that because when we do this thing happens that causes this note we don't like. Or really we distill, like, Jimmy's answer would be, well, we distill it at lower proofs than everybody else just about. That's our size. Why do we only distill to the 125, 130? Jimmy, we get more flavor that way. You distill much higher than that, you're going to lose flavor. And then Dad's answer would be, what we know more today, and how people talk today. Well, we're pulling off the types of alcohols and flavoring components that we want off that proof. If we go much higher, we go closer to just corn alcohol. Which is a little bit sweeter than we want. It's a little less complex than we want.
Yep.
And he would explain to me, all the different alcohols, which, growing up, you hear old wives' tales. Methanol make you go blind, so don't drink any moonshine because that's what's in there, And so, giving tours, people would be like, is it just ethanol? Yes, there is no other alcohols. Dad's like, well, that's wrong, actually. It's the trace amounts of all that stuff that is kind of scary sounding. Stuff that's in your lighter or stuff that's in your car or whatever, that makes all these delicious flavors. And he just would take the time to actually explain to me everything he knew. Yeah. Another big difference is what Jimmy says goes. That's just how he operates. I don't blame him. He is he's a titan of this industry. He really is. And the whiskey he made, and I mean this, it doesn't matter who you are in the world or what time you made it. I would put Jimmy's whiskey from the 60s until the early 90s against anybody that's ever made whiskey ever. I'm not saying it's better, but I bet it goes toe to toe. So I don't blame him when he said, because I say so. You know what I mean? Where Dad's is always, he's always been the type of person, he'll explain it and then he'll say, what do you think?
Huh.
What's your opinion on that? What do you taste? Or a lot of times he'll ask me, I'll ask him a question, he'll ask me, what do you think? Before he'll give me the answer.
Yeah.
Because he wants to see where my mind's at. And even some of the whiskeys that have come out recently, I think, not that I'm the one making the whiskey, but it's just like a lot of it is like, well, what do you think would be cool? Well, I think this would be cool. Well, I think that's kind of cool too. What if we did this? What if we... And so it will be like, well, I think it... Because my answers are always like, I think it'd be super cool if we did like a 10 or 15-year-old barrel-proof, age-stated, non-chill filtered dry whiskey. And he's like, okay, what's realistic? What's realistic is like we can take maybe a few years of our younger rye whiskeys and give it out at barrel proof.
Yeah.
And then it's an idea like that where Dad goes to a marketing team somewhere or whatever and says like, hey, we've got some good rye whiskey. I think this is a really neat idea. We should do something barrel proof. Well, then somebody in marketing that actually knows how to put ideas together and make products like, you know what? Rare Breed has had a little bit of a resurgence recently on the bourbon side. Shouts out to some bourbon bloggers and bourbon experts out there who have graded the 116 Rare Breed, the newest edition, super high, or it's won some crazy blind tastings, and that's helped Rare Breed. Well, Campari wanted to keep that momentum going, and Dad had been harping on him about a rye project, Rare Breed Rye.
There you go. Yep.
So that's, I think, the thing that Dad's best at is listening. And that's something that not a lot of other distillers do much of. And I get why. Because the consumer is not always right. Oftentimes they're not right. But oftentimes we're not right either. And so when you look at a lot of Dad's products, whether it's some of the Master's Keeps or Wild Turkey 81 or the new stuff coming out, Russell's 13 or Rare Breed Rye, these are things that not only have I wanted, but they're things that consumers have asked for. You know, Russell's 13, it's a age-stated 13 and older, non-chill filtered barrel-proof product. It's literally what every nerd on Reddit or any bourbon blog or that comes on a podcast, like, man, I just wish I could get that old Wild Turkey, at barrel-proof and non-chill filtered. Here it is. And so that's not because marketing did it. It's because Dad and me and enough of the nerd world has told Campari, this is what we want. Yeah. Jimmy never would have done that. He would have just done the whiskey he wanted to do. Yeah. And he in his mind, I think he knows like the whiskey I make's good. You're gonna like it. Yeah. Yeah. What I make is good enough that you're gonna drink it no matter what. The only time I think he really kind of broke the mold on that was American Honey. Okay. Where he did American Honey in the 70s. Before anybody else was really doing much flavoring or anything.
Dates back to the 70s?
The original one.
Shit, I didn't know that.
I think 76.
Yeah, okay.
Somebody listening to the podcast will be screaming at me because it's not the right date. But it's
how does he not know?
Because when it first came out, it's had like 2 or 3 different variations. Yeah. It was like Wild Turkey liqueur and then Wild Turkey liqueur with honey, or it used to come in this weird like hexagon shaped bottle at the bottom with a tall skinny neck.
And it was called a liqueur.
It was a liqueur.
So I didn't know that was
that's American honey.
I didn't know that was an American honey product. I just thought, if you look back at some older Scotch whiskey bottlings that refer to single malt as a liqueur, just because they're still trying to figure out the designations of what whiskey is and how we should be calling it.
And there was a time when liqueurs were hot.
Yeah.
Like that was like
okay.
That might have, maybe back in 76 that would have been the White Claw of its day. I don't know, but I mean it's not because we didn't sell any of it forever. But it had like 2 or 3 different iterations, and then I don't remember the date off the top of my head when we finally switched over to like the modern American honey.
Yeah.
But it's a huge product for us. So
wow.
Shouts out to Jimmy making it in the 70s.
Amazing.
Or maybe not, I might have my date wrong there.
So to bring this line of questioning home then, what's the why of Bruce Russell?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. See that?
Pick up what you're putting down.
Right now it's because I do what they tell me to do. The why behind everything I try to do in the whiskey world is to push Wild Turkey as far as I can into the space I think it needs to be or can be, because I think we make some of, if not the best, big distillery American whiskey in the world. I mean, it's American whiskey, so it's only in America. But I think the stuff we make is incredible for the size of distillery we're at, for any size distillery, especially for a distillery the size we're at. And I think that I'm one of those people, I always think there's more. We're getting there. There's no way Campari would have agreed to make Rare Breed Rye Russell's 13 even 5 years ago. Definitely not when they bought us.
Oh, okay.
The momentum we've got right now with Master's Keeps and the Russell's Vintages, the 98, 2002, 2003, seeing the reception critically and from consumers on those type of things, that is what's allowed us to make these other kinds of products. I feel like gives us a little bit more leeway with the company when we want to do non-big money makers.
Yeah.
Because stuff like Rare Breed Rye and Russell's 13, that's not what makes a company a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, it is more like stuff like American Honey.
Right. In this, I'm so glad you brought up this point. I think it's so important for a brand. Obviously, you're a distillery. You employ lots of people. You also have to pay these people. You also have to reinvest into the company. But there's something to be said about brand growth that leads to money making. And so it sounds as if 5+ years ago, Campari wasn't necessarily as receptive to what you're doing now, but they are now. What was that change in them maybe focusing a bit more on the brand growth that would then lead to the money-making aspect?
I mean, they started to see some of our brand work be successful on paper. So one thing, like a huge change in Campari in the last 5 or so years from the time I started. When I started working as a brand ambassador, I might have been the only full-time brand person in the company in the States.
Okay.
There's a guy named Mike Capoferri who's now owns an awesome bar out in L.A., and he used to be our Italian portfolio rep. But when I started, he was still working kind of part-time. There's another guy named Greg Butera up in Chicago that was doing part-time work. There were some people, I think, like on Bulldog Gin who were doing some like kind of part-time stuff. Well, now we have a whole part of our company that is dedicated to basically consumer needs and to on-premise stuff.
Yeah.
So consumer-facing, restaurant and bar-facing, you know, door-to-door interactions with people, and that stuff starts to work, and they get momentum behind that.
Yep.
And then, okay, we've got enough like buzz behind the brand now because of all this brand work we've been doing. Let's release Master's Keep, or let's release Russell's 98, and we're willing to do this one small thing, but at a super high price point, so we can make a lot of money, make a lot of profit per bottle. Oh wow, a lot of people like this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wait a second. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we can make some money off this stuff. And they also see, because it makes sense. A company doesn't, in whiskey you have to do this, a company doesn't want to wait for money. And so if 101 and American Honey are crushing it, it's super easy for a company, I think, to sit back and say, let's just ride this. Let's rest on our laurels. You know, let's ride this horse until it dies. And so I'll give Campari a lot of credit that they saw some momentum behind the brand. They saw some momentum with younger consumers, nerdier consumers, more educated consumers, and on-prem focused people. And they've started to produce stuff that those type of consumers want.
Yeah.
Even though those consumers make you way less money than, you know, your mid-shelf product that somebody's coming in with a coupon for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'll give Campari a lot of credit for their willingness to, once they saw a little bit of success, they're like, okay, let's try some more stuff.
Yeah.
Because now I think some of our new, more innovative products, they're as exciting as anything out there. There's a helicopter flies over here.
It's a Black Hawk. Look at that.
There's a National Guard place around here. Maybe it came from there. Yeah. Maybe it's just one of those people over in Versailles who are rich enough to have a Black Hawk helicopter. I don't know.
I'm intrigued when you're talking Jimmy Russell, My Way or the Highway. Eddie Russell, tell me what you're thinking. And let me help you guide you. What's Bruce Russell?
I think part of it is that trying to push this as far as I can because there's nobody else doing that. Because if there was somebody that was even more of a wackadoo than I am as far as like, let's put some weird fruit inside of the barrel and age it for, that kind of stuff, I would probably be a little bit more like Jimmy. Like, whoa, hold on now. So I think the other side of it for me is to, I do feel a sense of responsibility in keeping like Jimmy's spirit alive, doing things in a respectful way, doing things with a purpose, doing things for a reason, because he's not somebody. There's a part of me that likes to do things just to see what's going to happen, but there's a part of me that knows, make sure you've got everything else in order first, right? I'm a person like I never want to see what I consider Jimmy's brands to ever go away. 101, Rare Breed, Kentucky Spirit, because they're the foundation of what we built everything off of.
Yep.
So
Wonderful.
I think that part of my role is almost as like a keeper of history, as a keeper of tradition. There's not that many of me out there anymore. Most of the people that have grown up in this, and I get it because I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. There's not a lot here. You're driving 15 minutes to go to the movies or 35 minutes to go to the mall. It's not in my town. And a lot of people want to leave and get out and not do what their dad did. But for me, I would never want to see Jimmy die off. I always want people to know who he was because he means so much to me and this industry.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. And I'm so excited to see people like Freddie. Well, Freddie over there at Jim Beam doing what he's doing with Lil Book. He's named his things Lil Book. That's so cool because he is Lil Booker, Just in the same way that I'm probably a lot closer to who Jimmy is than Dad was. It's keeping these, and it's not just our families. Right? It's about the people that work out there in Boston or in Laredo at these distilleries. The people work here in Tyrone at our distillery. They're our family too. It's keeping their spirit and the stuff that they do every day alive, because there's not that many of us that are still in it. I think the easy way out. Me and Dad have talked about this before. The easiest thing for me to do would be, to start my own thing and put some weird cool label on it and do weird esoteric whiskeys and sell them for a bunch of money a bottle and be on the cover of magazines. You know what I mean? Like, be like a social media person or whiskey influencer, I believe is what they're called now, and be that type of person. It's the modern cool thing to do. It's what makes a lot of money in that kind of stuff. But if everybody was to do that, there wouldn't be any more Jimmys. People would kind of forget Jimmy and Elmer and Booker and Parker and Lincoln Henderson and all those type of folks. So it's really cool when you see folks like the Hendersons over there at Angels Envy or Freddie over at Jim Beam, just people that are really from it still be in it. And even if they're doing something different, like over at Angels, they're doing something a lot different than the stuff that Lincoln was doing for most of his career, but they're talking about him. Yeah, they're talking about how he influenced what they do. There's still a part of him in it. And that to me is just, it's so cool. One of the coolest things about whiskey in the world, I mean, it's been around a lot longer over in Ireland and Scotland than it has been here, but it's that you go over and it's an automated, like, super cool system, but then, the guy that's making it grew up on site and has been the distiller there for 40 years. That kind of stuff, you don't see that in other industries. That kind of tradition and stuff, it's so cool to me. And then, whoever, my brother has just had a daughter here recently. I'm an uncle. And so maybe if Naomi wants to be a master distiller one day, she can carry on the family tradition. But whoever it is that's after me and Dad, I just hope that they continue on kind of Jimmy's legacy.
It's important.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Not that many people just make really good 8-year-old whiskey. There's really not that many of us.
So as much as you can talk turkey all day, and you've lived turkey for the majority of your drinking life, hashtag responsibly.
Legal drinking life.
Correct.
Legal drinking life.
Correct. When we're not on the mic, and we've already done it today, and we've been hanging out, we're just talking whiskey. And you've mentioned it a few times today, which is the Heaven Hill 6-year-old bottled and bond that was cheap as chips, and I bought a ton of when I was in Kentucky. It wasn't available outside of Kentucky. People in the nerd side of whiskey are always trading picks, trading ideas, trading selections. If we can't spend our $12 to $15 on that Heaven Hill 6-year-old bottled and bond when we're in the state of Kentucky, where can we spend our money? What do you think is a worthwhile replacement?
If it's a good question.
Thank you.
I think that I don't really think there's a comparison for that product, to be honest.
Right.
It was so good for as cheap. And that's the weird thing about that product. I had some this weekend, by the way.
I got some in my house.
There's a place up in
2 bottles
Chicago
left. Oh, really?
that still has a bottle. And,
Oh, shit.
And I introduced it to my girlfriend for the first time. She's like, this is pretty good. And I was like, yeah, it is. And it used to be super cheap. And so I don't know if there's anything that cheap, that good, just because the world's different.
So I didn't think
Heaven Hill got rid of it. But
I didn't think it was outside of Kentucky. But there is like an
wasn't supposed to be,
Indiana,
but there's
Illinois kind of thing happening.
You say that, and then the people at the place I was at said, well, there's really only 2 places in the whole city that could get it. And so who knows?
Okay.
Who
There's
knows?
a will.
We're hunting. We're hunting.
Yeah.
I guess that's the benefit of being Heaven Hill. You're family owned, right? You know, don't have to do, you can do kind of whatever you want. But we have said this before. I think that it's the best time to be a whiskey consumer and only have like $20 in your pocket. Whether it's from us and just one-on-one.
Yeah.
Find that on sale here in Kentucky at Rite Aid or at your local Walmart or wherever it's on sale, Kroger, wherever it's on sale here. Get you some when it's on sale. It's awesome whiskey. Other stuff like, I'll tell you what's made a big difference is people like Bernie Lubbers, who goes on the road and preaches the gospel of bottled and bond. Are the best whiskeys in the world bottled and bond? No, because most of them are right at 4 years old and 100 proof. But you know what they are? They're affordable and they're really good for what the price points are. So just like Evan Williams bottled and bond.
That's what I've been hearing.
It's an awesome whiskey for the price point.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
It's kind of like the Heaven Hill 6-year. It's like we're so skewed as nerds now because we're all spoiled.
Yeah.
And so somebody will be like, I was just trying the 27-year-old Parker's blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yeah, that's not what this is about. Saying you got $20 in your pocket. Look for bonded stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it's, a Brown-Forman product or a Jim Beam product, OGD or Evan Williams. Evan Williams is just my favorite of those non-wild turkey things. That's an affordable around 100 proof whiskey.
Yeah.
There's plenty of stuff. Look for the bonded. I guess that's what I would say to somebody with not a lot of money in their pocket but wants to drink well.
Yeah.
Is look for that bonded. And then I guess try to find what style of whiskey you want. You can pay like $10 more in the $30 price range, and then that's when you start getting into some really good stuff. Like for us, Russell's 10, but every distillery is making something that is 6 to 10 years old in that range, 90 to 110-ish proof.
Such a phenomenal whiskey for like 30. I think it's around $34 where I am. It's just like it's no brainer. Great 10-year-old whiskey.
I've got a bottle on my shelf.
But yeah, there's stuff that Beam makes. There's stuff that Heaven Hill makes. There's some Old Forester products. That's the cool. Four Roses makes a bunch of affordable stuff that's really, really good. I love Four Roses, and so it's the best time to be a connoisseur of whiskey and only have $20 to $40 in your pocket. There's so much good stuff out there. Even we were talking to even some of these craft guys now. It used to be, it's a craft whiskey, it's $100 and 2 years old. No, now a lot of it's 4 to 8 years old and it's like $30 or $40.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that 6-year though. I don't know if there ever will be. And it's why they got rid of it. It was only available here, so they couldn't have sold that much because there's not that many people in Kentucky. If you ever listen to this in a major market, you have more people in your major market in your city than we do in our state. So, there's not that many people that live here, and so they just thought I guess they thought it was probably more work than it was worth for them.
Yeah.
But for sentimental reasons, I was sad to see it go, because I definitely drank more of that as a young consumer than I even did Wild Turkey. I love that stuff.
Have you tried the 7?
And that's what I was going to say,
Yeah.
right? It went away and then it came back as the 7-year-old bottled in bond
At about 3 times the price.
I would say
$40 a
I'd say
bottle.
drink them side by side.
Yeah.
I got to
Make your
do that.
decision, yeah.
I'd pay more for the 6-year.
Wow. Yeah.
I really-
there you go.
yeah.
Yeah. It was a great little drinker.
Well, the 7's available nationally.
It is nationally, yeah. I want to bring us back to Wild Turkey because we learned something. It's funny, and I don't know if I told you, but I definitely told your dad. Jason and I started the company in 2011. Sometime around 2015 or so, I was in Chicago, and I was meeting with Gene Sharness at Warehouse Liquors. Lovely guy. I absolutely love him. And he said, I want to taste you on this Wild Turkey pick that I did. And at the time I said, you know what? Wild Turkey is not really my thing. He said, I hear that a lot. Try my cask. So I gave it a go, and I fell in love. And it was through that connection. It was through Gene's passion, right? You talked about brand growth and like he's front line, right? That's important stuff. So I learned about Wild Turkey, and then we started a relationship with you. We start bottling some casks. Everything's from Tyrone. And then we get a little further into the relationship. Then we hear about Camp Nelson. We say, okay, I haven't heard of Camp Nelson before, but all right, let's give this a go and see what these warehouses are doing. And then we move on, and all of a sudden well, I just finished my glass. I need to pour a little more. But now we're hearing about McBrayer. And so, I think there are some hardcore bourbon lovers listening to the podcast right now. They're saying, yeah, of course, Tyrone, Camp Nelson, McBrayer. But there's people like ourselves who that's new to. So can you talk to us a little bit about McBrayer? What's going in there? Why is it different? What's happening? Because what we tasted today, just like many of your other warehouses, you have the one mash bill, but the flavor profile changes in wild ways. And what's been in our glass, we just keep going back to and back to and back to. So talk to us about McBrayer, and what's going on there and where those flavors are coming from.
Yeah, sure thing. To start off, I've heard some whiskey nerds kind of do the same thing, like, oh yeah, Camp Nelson. And then I always laugh. It's like, you all weren't even drinking turkey 10 years ago, much less did y'all know what Camp Nelson is.
Yeah.
And trust me, all the whiskey aficionados out there, as much as you love Camp Nelson, and you might like McBrayer after this year, because there's going to be some good private barrels coming from there, our distillery workers hate it as much as you love it, because those old warehouses over at Camp Nelson McBrayer, they're not in great shape, and they're really hard to get whiskey out of.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But I think it's worth the effort, of course, because I don't have to do it, right? But McBrayer it's been around forever. I mean, the old McBrayer distilleries over there, they've been around, longer than I have. They sit right across the street from Four Roses. So if anybody knows Four Roses, it's the other non-Lawrenceburg distillery. We both claim Lawrenceburg. Neither of us are in it. I think we are technically, because the city wants us in it. But where we're at, like where we're standing right now, is on a porch warehouse, say down in Tyrone, Kentucky, right above the river, the Kentucky River. I say the river like there's only one. It is
The
where you grow
river.
up. It's the river, just like Louisville's the city. And then Four Roses is on the opposite side of town, in a place called McBrayer. It's a small community out there, and there's a lot of history of whiskey being made out there.
Yeah.
I don't know how we ended up with those warehouses exactly, but Four Roses does not use the same type of warehousing everybody else does in Kentucky.
Yeah, it's all
For the
single
most part.
floor, right? Yeah.
It's single floor, but when we say single floor, if y'all picturing in your minds, it's not just 3 barrels tall, right? It's not just 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little taller than that, but it's not storied like ours are. We have 6, 7, and 8 story buildings here at Wild Turkey. Theirs is essentially one, so they don't use those warehouses across the street from them. We own them. They sit on their own down in this like little nook right by the Salt River. So a lot of moisture, a lot of air coming through there, a lot of wind. It's funny because it actually sits right in front of my family's farm out there in McBrayer. My other side of my family has always raised cattle.
Yeah.
Have an Angus farm back there. And those warehouses sit right on there. And it's super cool because on my grandfather's farm, there's actually still building, like foundations of old buildings that I've always known that were connected to the old school distillery operations that were there in McBrayer. Because his farm backs right up like to that river, the Salt River there.
Can I pause you just 1 second?
Yeah.
The distilling that was there a connection to Wild Turkey at that time, or it's
no, that's
separate?
old, like before
That's
Four
old.
Roses old
Okay,
and stuff like
okay,
that.
all
Like
right,
the other
okay,
people
cool.
that would have been making whiskey in
Gotcha.
McBrayer back
Okay.
in the day. But it's like everywhere in Kentucky. If there's a waterway or a river,
Yeah.
it'll attach
Yeah.
and get you to the Ohio and then to the Mississippi. There's going to be a distillery on it.
Yeah.
Four Roses is down there. They age all their stuff down in Cox's Creek. Not here in Lawrenceburg. So it's funny when people show up and they ask about those warehouses. They're ours. I think there's 3 warehouses there, maybe 4. I think there's only 3. But not all of them are in use. One of them, I know for sure, doesn't have anything in it. McBrayer, it's just kind of unusual. They're not, those warehouses aren't built the same way as ours. Some of the barrels are like down in the ground, kind of. Like not like underneath the ground, but they're just, it's laid out weird. And they have... I mean, we've tried 2 McBrayer barrels today, very different from one another. Now, I told you all before we tried them that's how I kind of thought about McBrayer this year. My favorite warehouse last year in these picks were S. I think you all ended up picking 2, and the third one that you all were going to pick was an S.
Yep.
It had this strange wood note
Yeah.
on a lot of it that I've heard a lot of people say it's cedar. Don't know, but a strange woody note. I loved it. But every single pick I tried from there, I either loved it or I did not like it at all. And I feel that way about these McBrayers. They vary so much, and they pick up a little bit of a darker and deeper flavor than I would say other barrels have, at least the ones this year, at the same age. Like the whiskeys we were trying out of McBrayer, they're just 8 years old. If I would have blind tasted them, I would have thought they were at least 10.
Yeah.
Maybe 12
Yeah. Yep.
on the flavor profile, where we also tried some Tyrone Fs. I thought the opposite. They taste like 8-year-old whiskeys.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way.
Yeah, great
It's just-
drinkers.
yeah, easy, sweet. I mean, it's the Jimmy Russell profile. It
Yeah.
is burnt sugar and vanilla and caramel and oak and just delicious, like every man's whiskey.
Yep.
You package that up and sell it at any of your local grocery stores, and they're going to be happy when they get that private barrel.
Yep.
The McBrayer is not that. I didn't think it was very sweet. It is very complex. It is atypical or off profile to most of our other stuff, and the samples vary way more than they do on the stuff from these Tyrone
interesting.
warehouses,
Yeah.
K or F. I am a little bit confused with K this year. I mean, this is the type of stuff that Jimmy's always told me. You got to be around here for 50 years before you can figure it out. I guess he's right, because in my mind, the last time K came around, there were these like awesome. You got one or two things. You got this crazy like red fruit bomb that I would have bet you at the time somebody did something to it, like poured some kind of a flavoring component into the whiskey.
Interesting.
It
Yeah.
was that extreme.
Yeah.
Or it was like a Snickers bar, chocolate and caramel and
Yeah.
peanuts and
Yeah.
a dessert, chocolate cake, pecan pie, that type of stuff. It's been Tyrone K. Most of the stuff I've tried this year is a little bit closer to F. It's a little bit more typical. It's been a little less of a super in-your-face flavor bomb.
Yeah.
I feel that way about McBrayer. It tastes old. It tastes unusual and interesting in a way that we normally, I say we normally don't get here, but I feel like every year I'm talking on one of these things, talking about another warehouse that's the new hot thing. But it's different than, because I think the last one that really blew up for us was Camp Nelson F. Anybody that knows anything about our private barrel program or our barrels in general, Camp Nelson F is a known quantity. And we were talking earlier, I think it might be the best warehouse we've ever had in the program because of the consistency of the barrels. Almost every Camp Nelson F barrel I've had's really good. I've never had a Camp Nelson F barrel that I was like, what is this?
Yeah, I gotcha.
In the way that we're sitting here drinking a bottle with a red top on it.
Yeah.
So we've been calling it red top. This red top McBrayer B, what is that? You know, it doesn't taste like anything else we've tried today. We tried I guess it would be a 11-year-old barrel in there, just about.
October
in 09.
will be 12. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, almost 12, 11-year-old barrel in here from Camp Nelson A. And we sat here and tried it. And I think one of the notes was grape, like a medicinal grape flavoring.
Yeah.
Like a cough syrup, and not in a bad way. And there was this like strange dark fruit, a grape,
Yes, purple nurple.
a plum, a blackberry, a sweet, bitter, tart fruit kind of note.
Yeah.
What is that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I wish, like, that's the type of stuff where aging, maturation is so much more interesting to me than anything on the distilling side of things. But you all both asked, what's the why? There is a why for everything, a how and a why for everything before it goes into the barrel. In the barrel, we know how it happens.
Yeah.
We know the process of esterification, where certain alcohols can meet with wood and oxygen, and they form these long, complex flavor chains that turn into stuff like apple pie, or depending on the distillery, banana or peanut. And I don't even have to tell you all what distilleries I'm talking about when I say banana or peanut. You all already know. We know how that happens.
Yeah.
We don't know why that one tastes grape-ish.
Yes.
And we tried 4 barrels. They were all made on the same date. They all aged in the same warehouse, and none of the other 3 had anywhere close to that same note.
At all.
I didn't even think any of the other ones were even fruity.
Yep.
No.
And we don't know why that barrel. And to me, that's so cool. That's the interesting part about doing this, and why I hope I never have to give up this private barrel program. Something Dad has always said, like, well, when I stop doing that, I'll retire.
Yeah.
Because it's the one place where we kind of get to be the little guys again. Like, I am extremely jealous of small distillers. They get to do whatever they want to do and get to try one barrel at a time all the time. And like, oh my God, today we made stuff that tasted like creme brulee.
Yeah.
It's like, well, most of the time we're batching stuff, and our whiskey's awesome, but most of the time our small batches are 150 to 250-ish barrels. Our large batches are 1,000 to 1,500 barrels.
Amazing.
And you know, the big guys, they're bigger guys, even though we're one of the big guys. There's even companies that, 1,000, 1,500 barrels. That wouldn't be that big of a dump. And so we don't oftentimes get the opportunity to do this type of stuff where you find the barrel that says, wow.
Yeah.
It's more about consistency. It's more about keeping that consumer happy, which is super important, like you said, because it is important in a company like ours to make money. And I really mean that, especially for Lawrenceburg. I'm not get on like the Lawrenceburg soapbox because I do this a lot, but me and Dad have said, if we ran the distillery, everything would be 15-year-old, and it'd be 15-year-old whiskey and 12-year-old rye, and it'd all be age stated and non-chill filtered and barrel proof, and we'd release, 10,000 bottles a year, and it'd be awesome. We'd win a bunch of awards. We'd be on the front of Whiskey Aficionado, all that stuff. But there's 200 and some people from Lawrenceburg that have jobs here. Yeah. Not a single one of them would be employed. It'd be me and Dad having to do it, because none of that, it wouldn't, Yeah. I will, this is one thing I'll give us credit for. I think we do a good job of kind of towing that line of making really high quality traditional whiskey, but also doing a pretty good job of it and making some pretty interesting things. But without this private barrel program, I don't know if people would get to try our most interesting stuff, to be honest. Because when I think of the most interesting or off-profile crazy turkeys I've had, it's come from a private barrel. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or something that somebody will say from the lab and be like, this is disgusting. I want you to try this. But that stuff's pretty interesting too. It's not very good, but it sometimes is super interesting. Yeah.
Well, to add on to what you're saying there earlier on, when Joshua and I were standing in the warehouse and you had to run off on a very quick errand, and Joshua and I kind of looked at each other and said, no matter how many times we come in here, it still feels like a privilege. And getting to go through those different flavor profiles and to explore those different rickhouse flavors it still feels incredibly special each time. And to have the program, right, the single cask program, the cask pick program, we would hate to see that go away as well. And it feels like such a connection to those who would geek out on the Wild Turkey single casks. And so, as always, we thank you for opening your doors and allowing us to walk through them.
I mean, me and Dad are just as excited to see most of the people come in here. You heard that quote? Didn't you? Most people.
I know. I was just gonna say,
I'm wondering which side of that fence we're standing on.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I don't know about Dad, but no. It honestly, I really appreciate you saying that, because the way I've always thought about it is it's. I want to give people the experience here that I would want somewhere else, and what I mean by that is the people in this industry. Shout out to Steve Bean out of Lebanon. I remember when I first started here, I called him up because I'd met him at a whiskey fest, and he was like, come down to the distillery. Come check out the weird stuff I'm doing. I'm like doing a barrel a day. Yeah. He was fermenting in open top barrels and went and hung out, and he just showed me everything that was there. Or, it's been a while. It was before COVID. I went to Willett and hung out with Drew, and it was me and Benny and my cousin Joanne, and he just took us in a rick house and was letting me try stuff out of a barrel that I remember telling him, like, this one's awesome. This one's not, and him just dying laughing and like giving me more samples. I want you to try this cool thing. Yeah. And I've been fortunate enough that because of who I am, I've got to do that a lot of places. And everybody always treats me real well. And being who I am, it's hard to tell if it's genuine sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Are you just treating me this well because I'm related to Jimmy, or because you actually like me being around? But regardless, I want people to have that same kind of experience here with me and Dad, that you're coming to our house. We want you. I want you to see the man behind the closed door. I don't want there to be, it's the man behind the curtain in Wizard of Oz. I don't want there to be a curtain. Yeah. I want you to see the man. So please come here so we can, tell you stories that's going to embarrass each other, and drink whiskey right out of the barrel. And, just like today, we were walking around. What are these barrels doing here? I don't know. Let's call somebody and see if we can open them up. And we could, That doesn't happen in too many other places. And it's that type of stuff that I think really makes this program special. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a project right now to try to take this program to the next level, see what else we can do. And one of the things they wanted me to list out were what are the threats to this program? Mm-hmm. Well, what could cause this program to lose momentum, lose its steam? And the two things I really think could happen: one, take away our involvement. If you took specifically Dad out of this program, I think it'd kill it. It was so cool coming to these for the first time. Before I was really involved, I just got to tag along with Dad. So I did that for a while, just tagged along. To see the way he interacted, to see people light up when they'd see him in his truck just standing out here on the front porch, so cool. And I realized that, like, the same kind of excitement I get when I go to a cool brewery in New York, Chicago, LA, Denver, wherever it is, and I've told them I wanted to come by, and they're like, oh, let's open this place up. When I went to Bardstown Bourbon Company for the first time, I remember them letting me in the lab and just trying a bunch of whiskeys. Like, look at that. We tried to recreate Wild Turkey. Try this. And it's like most places you go in, they wouldn't even want you looking in their lab. And it's experiences like that that they make my career. It makes me happy when people allow me to get in there and ask the nerdy questions and geek out. And so I know for people that didn't grow up in this and find it even more exciting than I do, it really makes it for them too. And I think that's the most special thing about our brand is the relationship building. Anyway, everything we've done has been based off relationships as far as our growth, the money we're making. Jimmy was the first one to go out on the road. And I mean, he was a door-to-door sales guy at liquor stores and bars. Please buy Wild Turkey. I'm the guy that makes it. Here's why it's good. Wow. And there is this thing about Jimmy that's really stuck with me where he grew up poor. And I don't feel sorry for him. He's got a pretty good life now. But he has a lot of that poor Kentucky boy sensibility still. Mm-hmm. He knows He's very aware that he is, one job away from not being what he is, from being the guy that rolled barrels for 40 years and then retired with a broke back or whatever.
Yeah.
He, I think, has always recognized how lucky he was. He's so appreciative. He always feels like he has to be building relationships. He has to spend that extra hour with that person at the liquor store, that even though it's 10 o'clock and he's 85 years old and he's signed 200 bottles, he's going to sit there and talk to that guy because he is just so happy he even gets to talk to that guy. And
That's cool.
And I will never have that same kind of thought process that Jimmy did, because I never grew up as poor as Jimmy. Now, Whiskey wasn't there's definitely a trajectory from like the house I was born into to the house that we had when I graduated high school, because Whiskey got a lot better. But I'll never have that. But some of that has rubbed off on me.
Sure.
That, if I'm in a big market city and somebody wants to talk to the just random guy from Lawrenceburg, I'm going to take the time to talk to that person. I'm going to sit down with that lady or sit down with that guy and give them the information they want or tell them the story that is going to make them laugh, because I am lucky to be able to do what I do and to be able to do something with my family who I love and to do something that I love to do. And so that relationship thing, it influences everything we do. And it's the reason why we have all our products. We talked about, we had to sell private barrels and Master's Keep before we could get to the rare breed rye and the Russell's 13. Well, the reason that exists is because of the people listening to the podcast right now and you all. It was people writing Campari emails and getting on Twitter and getting on Reddit and getting mad when they do certain things, or, mad that they didn't do a certain thing. It's that passion. It's bartenders writing the online petition when we got rid of 101 rye and saying, we're not going to carry Campari products till you bring it back.
Whoa.
It's our consumers have had way more influence on our products over the years based on the relationship, not only that they have with me and my family, but first and foremost, the personal relationships they have with our whiskey.
Yeah.
Which people don't even realize they have, but you'll hear that a lot. And it means a lot. We're talking about the grandpa thing. I drink 101 because the most important person in my life was my grandmother, and she drank 101. We'll hear stuff like that a lot. And that's not a relationship that person has with me. It's a relationship they have with the whiskey.
Yeah. Yep.
And to me, that's like the coolest thing. And there's a lot of people right now with relationships with whiskey, and a lot of it's ours. It's us. And we all just feel super lucky that the bourbon nerd scene, the vintage whiskey scene, the on-premise scene, bars and restaurants, the people that I have always kind of looked up to as far as like, well, whatever they're drinking is probably pretty good. They have really embraced our stuff and ran with it and built their own personal relationships with our whiskey and preached that to other people.
Yeah.
Our current brand ambassador, Benny Hurwitz, he's one of two of our brand ambassadors. The other one's my cousin, Joanne. But Joanne got the job because she's my cousin. She was born into this, kind of. Grew up in Tennessee, but a lot of respect for her because I grew up right here. It's super easy for me to get into this. She grew up right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, came up here to the University of Kentucky, got a summer job here, and just never left. So she fell in love with it almost as an adult, which I think is harder than what I did. But Benny, even further that way, he was somebody that fell in love with wild turkey and was just in Washington, D.C. telling everybody, why aren't you drinking wild turkey?
Yeah.
People would show up to Jack Rose and they'd want some, a certain 23-year-old whiskey. And Benny's like, no. Have you had cheesy Goldfoil?
Right.
It's even cheaper and it's vintage. And he would lead USBG classes and he would show up to things here at the distillery or throughout the nation and built a relationship with me and my family. And the only guy that reps our brand that's not a Russell is somebody that just built a relationship with us. And so that kind of stuff matters. I mean, everything from doing barrel picks with you all to most of my best friends in the industry, some of my best friends in the world, my girlfriend, all this stuff is based off of whiskey. It's relationships I built through this awesome liquid, this kind of thing we all love and share. Yeah, the relationships in the community are probably the thing that keep us going.
So So let me ask you a darker question.
All right.
That I know some of our listeners are probably passing through their brains right now, which is talking about community, we're talking about the people, we're talking about the love affair and the relationship with the whiskey. At the same time, this hobby is getting a little bit of a flipping problem where the passion might have run amok and people who have access to some of these bottles are grabbing them up and then selling them on for multiples of the price they paid. Do you... I don't want to lead you too much with the question, but what do you think the future holds for that corner of the enterprise, the hobby, the industry?
The worst of the offenders in that group I don't consider part of our community.
Right.
Because they're not in it.
Right.
They're in it to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's where the world is. They're just doing to whiskey what people are doing with NFTs. It's the same type of thing.
Wow.
They're doing the same thing to whiskey that's happened to sneakers. I like shoes. I can't buy any shoes I like because somebody writes a program to be able to buy a shoe the second it comes out and then they sell it for $2,000 online. Mm-hmm. I don't discourage people from selling secondary whiskey. If that's what you want to do, cool. I got a lot of friends that sell whiskey on the secondary. But I definitely think that there's a way to go about it. If you're taking a whiskey, and you see this a lot, if you're taking a whiskey, but I mean, this is just capitalism a little bit. If you're taking a whiskey that you know is about $300 in worth, and it's a vintage, and you want to make a little money and you sell it for $400, and somebody buys it, so be it. Cool. That person's buying it to drink, cool. But if you're buying whiskey from a guy and you're in the know and you're buying it for $300 and then you're selling it to somebody for $1,000, I don't like that. Yeah. I don't. Because I am a believer that this stuff is supposed to be drank. This is a consumer good. This is supposed to be consumed. This isn't even a sneaker that is to be worn and shown off. This is not a trophy. And if you buy whiskey to put on your shelf and just sit pretty, please give it to me. I will drink it. You can fill that same pretty bottle up with iced tea, and no one will be any the wiser. If you're buying whiskey as an investment, you do you. I don't think that's the right way to be thinking about these products. There are other things you can invest in, trust me, that is safer, that is going to make you just as much money in the long term, and you're not keeping a product that should be consumed away from people that will consume it. And that's the thing that I hate is some of the best whiskey, and I think y'all agree, some of the best whiskey in the world is vintage. Mm-hmm. Or it's harder to get, just rare in general. Mm-hmm. And that's everything from modern hard-to-get bottles like Japanese whiskeys to vintage stuff like 70s and 80s Wild Turkey to Scotch from the 17 or 1800s. Yeah. Some of the coolest, most interesting whiskeys in the world. I wish we were in a place where most people that wanted to try them could get the chance to do so and wouldn't have to put a second mortgage on their house or... Now, I'm lucky enough that I'm in Kentucky, and I will say this to you listening. If you want to get into this world, if you want to drink these crazy whiskeys that you think you'll never get a chance, yes, you will. Ask. Talk to people. Mm-hmm. Join a community. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It doesn't matter. If you're in Lawrenceburg, this is not the middle of nowhere because it's in the middle of two cities, but this is small. I mean, this is a 10,000-person town. We've got a Walmart and a highway. The highway is probably the only reason it exists besides the distilleries. If you live in Lawrenceburg, you can find other people that have good whiskey around here. Now, you might have to drive 30 minutes to be a part of the Lexington Bourbon Society or whatever it is. I don't even know if that's the name of a bourbon society. I think it is.
It is now.
It is now. I just made it. No, I'm pretty sure that exists. But there are people around you, almost no matter where you're at, that are in this community that are good people.
Yep.
Agreed.
That honestly, most of them are just itching at the chance to find a newbie and be like, let me show you something, my guy. Yeah. Or my lady, like, let me give you some BTAC from 10 years ago that will blow your mind. Let me give you this 20-something-year-old bottle of whatever esoteric whiskey it is, or even just, I've never had whiskey before, and the person's like, let me open up a bottle of Rare Breed.
Yeah,
Let me open up a bottle of this private Knob Creek pick that we got that's 15 years old. Yeah. It doesn't have to be super old. It could be, a single barrel of Four Roses that you thought was interesting. But there's somebody out there that will let you try this. You just have to be also a part of the community. And that's one thing I do like about whiskey, is that I see all the time somebody will be online and they're like, man, I never got to try the 98. That's a bummer. It's the one whiskey I've always wanted. It's my bucket list whiskey. And they'll say that online. Next thing you know, somebody sent them a free sample in the mail.
Yep. 100%.
Happens all the time.
100%. It's such an interesting aspect of, and it's funny, you used the word hobby before, and I used to dislike that word associated with whiskey drinking. I'm starting to warm up to it a bit more. But it's so interesting that this hobby is a community-based hobby. Meaning that people, they get excited about it and they want to share and they want to bring you into that inner circle of friends, so you have someone to drink with, right? I think that's such an important aspect of drinking, is drinking it with someone else.
But I also think that's where so much of the hurt and the frustration comes with the flipping, which is, that's a bottle that could have been shared, that could have been opened, that could have been amongst the rest of the community, and all you did was pick it up, flip it, and make bank. This is so much more than money. This is so much more than making bank. It's making friends. It's growing a community.
It's a memory. I think, especially with food and beverage, my fondest and probably strongest memories are things that I've ate and drank, and the people that are associated with those foods and drinks.
Absolutely.
And the thing that I hate, I'm calling anybody that's listening that does this stuff, I'm calling you out. Stop it, please. What I've seen happen is there's so much money in it now. You'll have a person go to a liquor store, and they'll spend 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000, 100,000, however much money you're spending a year in the liquor store. And so what I've seen a lot is somebody that has access to this liquid, and they get it, liquor store owner, bar owner, that whoever gets it, they've got a customer that helps pay their bills. Well, here, I'll give you this bottle without anybody else even getting a chance.
Yep.
And a lot of times it's that type of stuff, or sometimes it's the owner that's taking that bottle and then flipping it online. Yeah. It's when no one else gets a chance that I don't like it. Now, if you have a super rare whiskey and there's only 1,000 or so bottles in the world and you're selling it online at a bunch of money because you bought it for a bunch of money, I get that. But it is it's the fact that, like, and I know Sazerac and Buffalo Trace has come out against this stuff, so I'm not saying anything against them, because I know they get frustrated at times. You're taking a product like Blanton's, which is not an extremely expensive product. And for most people that don't have connects in the liquor world, they got to spend hundreds of dollars online for it. That is so ridiculous. Yeah. And that is not the way to do it. It is not. So if you're selling secondary, or if you have like rare and vintage whiskey, or if you're a shop, because there's one shop here in Kentucky, there's a lot of shops out in California that do that sell specifically rare and vintage goods. It's going to be high priced because it's rare and vintage. But the difference would be a liquor store owner that's getting modern stuff and then it never hitting the shelf. Ever. It's either going to your best customer, or it's going to your uncle or whoever it is, or yourself who's flipping it online. And that's the wrong way to go about it. It's when you're keeping everyone else out of they don't have an opportunity to even try the liquid they want to try, because that's what this stuff is made for. If it was up to Jimmy, everything we'd make be $50 or less. He doesn't even like that we charge $150, $250 sometimes for our bottles. He does not like it, because to him $50 is still expensive. He drives a 98 Ford Ranger, candy apple red. Doesn't even have like real back seats. It's got those back seats that when you sit in them they turn towards each other. So you got you're knocking knees if they're ever sitting in the back with you. And his house might be worth $100,000. Because he's a creature of habit. He's had the house for 40 or 50 years, and the car's a vintage now from '98.
That's
I think how much it would go for Jimmy Russell's
Oh my
'98
God.
vintage
it
truck.
would
Yeah.
actually. Wait,
Six digits.
Sell it
Wait,
with a
no,
bottle of
wait. I
98
disagree with
and have
everything
something
you all have said. Anybody that wants to buy Jimmy's truck, hit me up. But yeah, I agree. There's definitely. Well, I mean, this happens in every industry that starts making money. But for anybody that's their main goal is to make money, you're not in my community.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got friends that sell stuff secondary, buy, sell, and trade. When I go to their house, they open up those good bottles for me.
Yep.
They're in my community.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking, they don't have to open them up for me. But if you have nice liquid and you don't share any of it, or you don't enjoy it yourself even, you can be a curmudgeon and not have friends. That's cool. I got people in my life like that. And sometimes I feel like that. So I don't want to see anybody for a week. Open up that bottle and drink it. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yep.
What are you doing? Invest in to something else. Just get out. Go away. Like, get out. It's a disgusting side of the type of economy we're in. Is I can't buy a PlayStation 5 if I want one because there are computer programs that people put on there that will be VPN to look like they're coming from all over, and they're buying them up right away faster than a human being could get them.
100%.
And so now I got to get on StockX and buy one for $800. I'm not doing it.
You and me both. I keep looking for PS5s. Like, there it is on StockX for
And whiskey,
$7.98.
yep, you've been looking at the same. Me and you have been looking at the exact same PlayStation. But the whiskey has turned that way.
Yeah.
Sneakers have turned that way. Any luxury commodity good in America right now, there's some tech savvy 20-something-year-old dudes who are making some money off people with got more money than sense.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate it. Shame on y'all.
Yeah.
And they don't care. They're laughing to the bank. You know,
Yeah.
I got my money. But as far as whiskey's concerned, whiskey is not the same as video games or shoes. You can play that video game later. It's going to be the exact same video game. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't care about the PlayStation 5. I could have paid $1,200 last year when it first came out. Mm-hmm. I could pay $750 right now and get one. I don't care.
Yeah.
I can wait till this Christmas hopefully and find one. If I don't, I'll wait till next Christmas. Yeah. I'm going to play it. Yeah. Whiskey changes, and it also is hoarded in a way where it won't be used. Nobody buys PlayStations to set up on a shelf and just sit.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm not going to open that game.
And something like shoes, they usually are going to be worn to be shown off. Now, you might only wear it one time because of the expense of the shoe, or you might be wearing it literally to put up to show off. Yeah. But it's art in a way that you're supposed to look at it.
Yeah. Yep.
That is the reason it exists. Mm-hmm. Because when you're buying $500 to $1,000 pair of shoes, it's not for function.
Yeah.
No,
you're
it's
not hiking in them.
Yeah, it's for form. Yeah, 100%.
You're not buying a $800 pair of vintage Jordans to go play basketball in at the Y.
You're not.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, somebody might be rich enough to do that. Shouts out. But whiskey is made to consume, to enjoy. And the fact that it has turned into this almost NFT-like thing, it's disgusting. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't hate everybody that sells whiskey online, but I hate everybody that keeps others from being able to get it.
Mm. Yeah, and that's been our stance. Is, when we do 2 barrels with you, you're going to have 150 bottles per barrel, 300 people. We've got around 9,000 people desperate for that, and they're simply not all going to get it. And it's when we have nation members who see other people flipping it, and they say, I would have paid you my 101, and I would have opened it the second I got it, and I would have shared it with friends. But the only way I can get it is if I pay this person $500 or $800, whatever it is, and you can understand the frustration. So
Absolutely.
I see exactly what you're saying.
And it's just, it's something we're all dealing with.
Yep.
Us less than Buffalo.
There's that. Yep.
Everybody less than Buffalo.
Yeah.
But everybody is dealing with it to some degree. Mm-hmm. Everybody's making something that's being flipped right now. And Some of it I can understand because they're vintages and you're buying and selling and trading all the time. And, I bought this for like $400 a couple years ago and it's went up in price. So I'm going to sell one bottle of it for $600 or $700 and then I can get 2 bottles of this other thing I'm going to drink.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yep.
That is cool. That happens all the time. But it's the PlayStation thing. I'm going to go in this liquor store and I'm going to buy up. Hey, Joe, when does your Blands come in? Oh, it comes in on Tuesdays. I'll be in every Tuesday, and I'm going to buy all 4 cases you get every Tuesday. I mean, I don't think anybody's getting that much Blands. But, it's that type of guy who's not letting he doesn't even let anybody else even play ball.
Yeah.
I'm the only one that can play basketball here. It's that kind of stuff that makes me mad. Yeah. But it is what it is.
Okay, get us out of here on something happy.
Yeah, because you took us into something
that's me.
real
You know
dark.
me. Yeah. Philosopher by trade, you know me.
So you and I, Bruce, were on this Campari Zoom meeting along with Ryan. And you talked about some potential new things coming down that you were excited about. And I know one of them, I didn't know if it was a definite or more of a potential, but I think one of them was the possibility of Russell's picks coming out at barrel proof, non-chill filtered. And is that going to be a thing? Is that something you're looking forward to the next 5 years, or is it going to be kicked down the road, or what has you excited?
I think that is on its way in the next couple years, hopefully. I was telling y'all this before. For the first time in my career at Wild Turkey, I finally found somebody to help me champion this program. I think he's a VP level person in Campari, so has the juice. He's got the sway to make stuff happen. It's just not just a lot of times when me and Dad are like, "Well, they're telling us we can do it." Well, usually the them is a brand level person.
Yeah.
So lower than Dad is in the company on the totem pole.
Gotcha.
Just on a different side of things. Well, this is somebody that's high enough up that he can make some stuff happen. He doesn't have to ask anybody for permission. And he's realized how influential our program is, how cool this program can be, that this is the thing that our consumers are really most passionate about. When you see, because I presented to my boss about this just yesterday, actually. I wrote about the consumer loyalty and excitement with our private barrels in particular. And what I mean by that is a lot of people I see out there are not first-time buyers of Russell's picks.
Yeah.
They're looking, and there's a lot of people like this, and it's not just Russell's. Like, I hear people, hey, you know anybody else got Four Roses picks around here? You know anybody else that's got people following? But if you're a Russell's picks person, you're probably getting Russell's picks because there's lots of good ones everywhere. But there's also excitement around this stuff that we see that doesn't even really happen for most of our normal releases, where you'll see somebody write some kind of a review online. It'll be getting 99 out of 100, and they tried, Joe Schmo Green Hulk 7 Russell's pick from Des Moines, Iowa.
Yeah.
And it's the best. And you know what? It might be the best Russell's barrel. Because honestly, like, most of the best ones that I've ever had, even though, like, there are certain people, you all are certainly a group that I think always does a really good job picking your barrels. There are other folks. We've talked about Jamie Ferris earlier today. He's picked some incredible barrels. There's been certain bourbon groups that have picked some incredible barrels. I remember one from Blackout, the bourbon group, that was really good one year. But most of the time, it just comes from a mom and pop liquor store that got in here with Dad on the right day, and he just happened to roll out the best barrel.
Yeah.
And somebody be like, and David Jennings or our buddy Ryan that we're going to drink with a little bit later on tonight, or a couple of my buddies from Moonshine down in Austin, somebody like that knows me and knows that I'll be into it, be like, have you tried the barrel from Liquor Warehouse 4? From some random small town? I'm like, no, why? And they're like, it's the best Russell's pick I've ever had. And they're right. It usually is really good. That stuff it's super cool, and it's that kind of excitement. We don't see that for any of our other stuff.
Yeah.
And part of that is the same thing we're talking about with the secondary market. the other stuff people get super excited about is not obtainable realistically for your average consumer. I think oftentimes our opinions get skewed because it's like, oh, Russell's 98. Most people don't have $250 to spend on a bottle of liquor.
Yep.
For a lot of people, that's a month's worth of groceries.
Yeah.
You know, even the Masters Keeps, it's $150 is asking a lot, and there's limited quantities of these things. These Russell's picks, if you've got a decent little liquor store near you, they're going to have some kind of a private picks, probably pretty good. Might be us, might be Sazerac, you know, might be Beam. Beam has put out some insane picks. I'll be like, how old's that Knob Creek? And somebody will be like, 15. Like, they're giving 15-year-old barrels away? What are they doing? And it'll be really good. That stuff, I think, is like, it's so much easier to obtain. It's so much more realistic for your average consumer to get a hold of. And it's honestly just as good a lot of times as these super rare. Don't kill me, compadre. Everybody, please go out and buy this year's Masters Keep, but which will be excellent, like all our other Masters Keeps are. And they're more unique, right? They're a packaged, on-purpose product compared to private barrels are accidents, complete accidents. We didn't go in trying to make any of these; they just ended up that way.
Yeah. I like that. I like that view of it. Yeah.
And so these are honestly usually just as cool a lot of times, and. It's a Russell's pig. You can go get it for $50 or $60.
Yeah.
That's super cool. You can go get a Four Roses pig. You can get just about all these picks for less than $100. And to me, that it's so neat. And if you're a whiskey nerd and you're like me and don't have that much money, that's where it's at. Is asking the other whiskey in another part of the community.
Yeah.
What liquor store do you go to? Who do you trust to get your private picks? And I mean, that's a reason why people get online and go crazy for your all's picks. It's because people trust the picks that you all make. They trust in your all's process. They trust in your all's palate, and they know it's going to be good. And if you can find that person locally, you've won.
Yeah,
you've won. Here in Kentucky, there's a big box chain store that I think does a really good job. There's some mom and pops that do really good jobs. It's finding that one. There's one not that far away from my house. That if anybody's like, well, I don't want to go to a chain liquor store. I want to go to a locally owned liquor store who's going to have a decent selection and who's going to have some cool picks. I know who to tell them because that person's been doing it forever and they're in the community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's affordable when you go in there, and they're going to tell you their opinions. Oh, we think this one's even better than this one because it's got. That's the stuff to me that's so cool is when you walk into a store and they're also in the community. Right. They're like, oh. You wanted this? No. Let me tell you about this other thing I've got going on that's even cooler and cheaper or cooler and then the same price range. It's complete opposite of some of these other liquor stores around here. I was in one not too long ago. I walked in. They don't know who I am. I don't walk around with a name badge or anything. But I walked into a non-mom and pop liquor store, and I was picking up some stuff for a training. Believe it or not, I don't get any whiskey for free. I got to go and buy it at the liquor store like everybody else does. Swipe a card. Well, I went in there to get a couple bottles of Russell's and a bottle of Long Branch because I'm doing a training. And the lady sat there and tried to upsell me on a competitor's brand for like 20 minutes when I was just trying to leave. Like, she wouldn't even let me leave. She was desperate for me to get that upsell.
Was there some employee bonus on the upsell?
I don't know, maybe. But I just wanted her to leave me alone. And it's a complete opposite experience I have a lot of times in Kentucky where I'll pick up a bottle and they'll be like, why'd you get that? Oh, that's cool. You know, that kind of thing. They're just so excited that I'm in there buying money, or spending money and getting whiskey that they want to ask me about what's going on. Or my favorite thing in Kentucky is when you find, I don't know what you call them, the young nerd. You'll find a young man or a young woman that's working in there that they've joined the liquor store and they fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And then they just want to spend the next 30 minutes telling me, have you had Four Roses small batch? And every time I'm like, nope, tell me about it, you know, because I want to hear that person tell me for the next 15, 20 minutes about why they love it. And it's always either, there's a connection always. It's the first thing I had when I came to work here. Or Al Young came in here one time and I shook his hand. That kind of stuff. I'm like, tell me more. feed that into my veins, because that's the stuff I live for. Is when, and the best compliment or like the coolest thing I hear is when I leave a place or I've been to a place, and this happened very recently. This is the type of stuff I'm like, dang, I'm not that bad at my job, I guess. There's a place out in California that's buying some private barrels from us, and the guy said, I'm buying private barrels from y'all because I sat in on a seminar that Bruce did, and he was very personable and came and talked to us and stuff afterwards. And that meant a lot to us, and so now we want to buy these private barrels. That's the stuff I live for.
Yeah.
Is when that relationship building, that personal aspect can make a sale over. Because what I hate doing, I squirm anytime they ask me to do this or I have to do this. Hey, I want to take your well spot, and I can give you a 6-case discount deal. And no, that ain't for me. I know that stuff has to happen, right? That's how bars make money. That's how suppliers make money. I hate it. I hate doing that kind of stuff. It's the opposite of who we are. I want you to drink my whiskey because you like me and you like my whiskey. And if you don't, that's okay. It's perfectly okay. I'll come in here and drink somebody else's good whiskey. If you don't have any whiskey at your bar, maybe. You better have some pretty good beers, some mezcal or good tequila or something in there. Again, talking about the relationship stuff still, it's that's the stuff that I love. That's the stuff that I love. Well, hopefully we'll be at a place tonight drinking some good stuff where everybody's pretty friendly. They're not too bad, I guess.
Looking forward to that.
Oh, hey, thanks, man.
I got one question for you all.
Oh, right.
Oh.
What is the most interesting thing that you've tried recently? Not best. That's easy.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. And you can't cop out and say it's one of the things we had today.
Even though it is one of the things we had today, funnily enough. What time period are we talking about? What time span here? Last month?
Since the last time I've seen you.
Oh, gosh. Oh, I'm going to be 100% honest with you.
All right.
I'm going to pour it for you tonight. It's going to be that exact thing that I've got in the car for you.
I know exactly what you're talking
about. And it was a recommendation that came down from Anthony Levinson at Roma. And so you talk about people, you talk about community, you talk about who you trust. And so he told me this little thing, and I said, that's going to be perfect. And I picked it up, and I picked up a bottle for Joshua. And within this episode, I'll talk about it after this portion of the interview.
Cool.
So I don't want to reveal too much about what I'm pouring for you.
God, that is a really good and difficult question. I can think of a recent one. I don't want to name the distillery yet because it was a cask sample.
Oh, okay.
From an American producer who is producing malt whiskey, and I tasted this cask sample, and if you had told me that it was a 12 to 15-year-old Glenfarclas or something, or just some heavily sherried Speyside whiskey, I say, oh yeah, of course, yep, definitely, that makes good sense. The fact that it came from an American producer that was able to nail a style down, that I found really intriguing. So I like that they're able to take a style out of its origin and reproduce it.
It's
elsewhere.
I think I might have said this on the last time I was on your all's podcast. I wish that's the way American whiskey would go, is these like cool, weird regional styles where like certain people make single malts, certain people make corn whiskey, certain people make rye whiskey. I just think there's so much opportunity to do neat styles of whiskey here based on all our weird climate differences and geographical differences and what grains are available where and what water is available. Yeah, that kind of stuff's super neat.
Well, you were talking earlier about Indiana Rye getting its own designation.
I was super excited to see that. Yeah, the governor signed into law that Indiana Rye is going to be its own distinct spirits designation as far as the state of Indiana is concerned. I don't know how that works.
Yeah. Well, I think Tennessee makes similar claims.
Yeah.
But it's a Tennessee claim, not a
federal claim. But I'm super excited to see that. I love and it's funny that it's just now called that because that's literally, that's what I've called it on the road because I don't know what other word to call it. So it's like, it's just Indiana style rye whiskey. It's just 95% rye. I love a lot of their stuff.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of these small craft producers that are now making their own stuff built their brands off of MGP rye,
Yep.
Yeah.
Indiana rye.
Yeah.
I mean, MGP's so big.
Yep.
It could be Indiana rye.
Right. Yeah.
It's awesome. And it is its own distinct thing. If you pour me an Indiana rye and you pour me a Kentucky rye, I'm going to know almost 99% of the time which one's which, because they each have such distinct flavor profiles. They have a different finish. They usually have a different nose. And it's almost to the point where I've had so much Indiana rye that's my default when I think of rye now.
Yeah.
We make rye, and I don't think of our rye as the default. I'm like,
that funny?
there's like rye whiskey, like Indiana rye, and then there's the Kentucky style, because I've just had so much of it. I was super excited to see that. And why can't there be Washington malt
Yeah.
or whatever?
Yeah.
You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yeah, they're working on it.
Yeah, they are. I just think there's cool, interesting stuff made just about anywhere.
So what's your answer to your question?
I just was up in Chicago and tried some of that 15-year, like privately done Willet rye that was incredible, to be honest. Just absolutely incredible. I'm a man of simple tastes, though, so probably the most interesting stuff I try is usually just a private barrel that someone has given me. Like, I just finished off a private barrel, and I'd had it before and then went back and retried it during COVID because I didn't want to be going to the liquor store or anything. So I was actually starting to drink up a lot of my backstock.
Yeah.
And there's a brewery up in Chicago that came down and started picking barrels, really through a good buddy of mine that worked for them, a guy named PK, and gave me their Off Color Brewing is the name of the brewery. They purchased
I know Off Color.
a private barrel. Yeah. And I think they've had more than one, but the one that I recently had, God, it was so good. Dark and fruity and a little bit like these McBrayers, just tasted 4 or 5 years older than it was and was absolutely delicious. I tell you, the best thing I've had in the past year was the lab sample for Rare Breed Rye, honestly. And that, to talk about probably my favorite thing we're doing right now, it even tasted better in the lab. And very few times, I don't know, anybody that works in this industry will know what I'm talking about. A lot of consumers probably think like, we have an idea and we do it and it works. No. Most of the time when we're trying our first samples, like we're trying samples for some stuff for this year and next right now, a lot of times it's like, none of this stuff's very good.
Wow.
How can we make it taste better?
Yeah.
How can we put all these things that we think are just pretty good, blend them together and make something spectacular? Red Breed Rye was the complete opposite.
It just worked.
Yeah, the young lady, Shaylin Gammon, who is on our product development team, on our technical team over here in the lab, helps Dad out a ton. Helped me or had me and Dad come to the lab to try samples. The very first day we tried it, I was like, "Oh, wow, oh, this stuff's good." That might be the best thing. I don't know. Some mezcal, maybe.
So,
Right.
so there's two things because I mentioned to you my most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of a head turner, but there was one, and we tasted this on a podcast, and it's a mezcal. Shit, Jason, maybe you remember the name because I don't.
No, cul-de-sac ahead.
Yeah, right. But we tasted through 7 mezcals, and there was one that it smelled and tasted like all things Christmas.
Really?
It was fruitcakes and pine needles and Christmas wreaths and just like all the
it makes me think of
things.
like an Amari almost, like a Braulio.
Yeah, right. Like the flavors were within there, but just with an agave backdrop.
Interesting.
Like it was wild. I think Jason's looking for it now. So while he's looking for that, so once he finds it, we'll have to tell you because I know you.
I definitely want some. Yeah,
you need to do that.
It's like when I'm on the road, or when I was on the road because I was at the distillery for a little while. Hopefully, I get back on the road here pretty soon. When I would travel, especially to California and Texas, always the most interesting thing I would try that year would be a mezcal.
Yeah.
Because somebody would have muled over some weird pachuga in some water bottles where the labels have been ripped off. And we're drinking that in somebody's backyard at a barbecue, and it tastes in the best way possible. Like you've filtered some amazing agave product through a sock, or something weird, you know. It's like somebody
Keep talking. I'm almost there.
Yeah, it's like somebody's been chewing bubble gum while they drank this and then like spit it back out into the bottle or whatever. Yeah. It's got this weirdest, funky, vegetal, earthy, almost meaty flavor at times. And that stuff to me is just...
It's wild.
Otherworldly, yeah.
It
is supernatural in the flavors that they can make. And it's just so neat.
So the one that I'm talking about, the producer is Mayaleen, Mayalen.
Oh, okay.
And the agave is called Cupriata, which was a new one to me. We'll send you a picture.
Okay.
Mezcal Artisanal Borrego. Just absolutely phenomenal. But you know, and I realize we are, you know, an hour and 46 into this conversation.
And mezcal is one of those things. The more basic and like homemade the label looks, the better it's going to be. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then when you hear stories like our friend Robert is like, and then I had this raicilla, you know, which is basically mezcal made in a state where you can't call it mezcal.
Yeah.
Where they distilled it in the radiator of a truck. And you're like, yes, let me at that. That sounds interesting. And they did, you know, they did it in a tree trunk. Yeah. Like, all right, okay. You know, and just people making do with what they have, producing these wild spirits. So this is my final question for you.
Sure.
You talked about Rare Bird Rye just working. Now, for me, I told you this. I love Wild Turkey Rye. When Cornerstone came out, I said, oh, gosh, it was great. It was great. And I still have about 3/4 of my bottle. Did that just work out? Like, do you find that with your ryes, or was Cornerstone like a lot of some of your other projects where it's iteration after iteration after iteration until you get it to where you want it to be, or to where your dad wanted it to be?
Well, I mean, the rye whiskey was so good that went into Cornerstone, it somewhat just worked out. Finding that right blend of ryes, because it is a blend of a few years there.
Yeah.
The oldest stuff being around 11. And there's some stuff that's a couple years younger than that in there too. The 11 was so good, but it was so strong in flavor that it was tough for us to, you know, blend that in a way to make that product work the way it does, where it's balanced. The older rye had a little bit too much wood influence. It had started to not turn sour. But rye whiskey ages very quickly, and so it was starting to age in a negative way. I think that's almost all whiskeys have like a peak. Some of them peak at 6, 8, 10, 12.
Yeah.
I've never met a whiskey that peaked at 4. Yeah. But I've also never met a whiskey that peaked at 20.
Yeah.
So you have to catch it. And that 11 was just starting to turn that corner. Mm-hmm. And so that little bit of younger whiskey, I think, really helped it. And it was hard to figure out what that balance should be. And so, unlike the others, we knew we had like, this whiskey is a hit. This is a banger. When that happens, we're feeling pretty good, because then we just have to deviate a little bit one way or the other. It's when the hardest part is when you have a lot of whiskey that's just good.
Yeah.
Instead of special.
Yeah.
Very, very few products that anybody does are special in that way. And everybody that's listening in has tried something when they try to, like, this is special. This is insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
That happens in our lab sometimes. Russell's 98 was one. I had no clue what it was. They weren't calling it Russell's 98. The juice just came from 98. I remember going up to the lab, and Dad's like, go up here and try that. Tell me what you think. And me looking, it's one of those times like I literally dropped my jaw.
Yeah.
I looked at him, you know, like a fish out of water. Like, what? Blew my mind.
Yeah.
The complexity, and also the deliciousness of that whiskey. Yep. That is one thing that is, I think, really hard to find with old whiskeys like that. Guess what's not hard? Keeping a whiskey in a barrel long enough that it turns complex. That's how nature works. That's esterification. The longer you keep it in that whiskey, the longer and more complex those flavor chains become.
Yeah.
But to get that complexity in a old whiskey, in a really anything older than 13 or 14 years old, and to keep that just objectively delicious flavor that you get between, I think, depending on the distillery, 6 and 12, for us 8 and 12 really is when it really, I mean, that's why we do our private barrels in that age range. Everything we've tried has been 8 to 11. That's when our stuff mostly hits its peak. So 98 was something special. And then we've run into other stuff that we knew was special. The very first Master's Keep that came out of those old warehouses, like over at Old Taylor and Old Crow, like in that area.
Oh,
it was 17
like
years
cement
old.
Floor one.
It was like 80 something proof, barrel proof. It did not taste like bourbon, in my opinion. Such a unique whiskey. So when you try stuff like that, you're like, oh, this is special. It doesn't even necessarily even have to be like the best thing you've ever had. Because we talked about this earlier. I'm way more concerned with, let me try something I've never had before.
Yeah.
That's also of quality.
Yep.
Quality does matter. But point of view matters to me even more almost. If you come to me and you're making Wild Turkey 75, 13, 12 at 8 years old and it's 101 proof, it's probably going to be pretty good if you try to make it the same way we do. And, if you could probably make a pretty good one. I don't want it. We do that. Give me something I've not had. Yeah. I think a lot of craft distillers are doing that. Even some of the big guys are doing that now. I've been begging Wild Turkey to make me a single barrel proof, non-chill filtered rye whiskey. I think I heard recently that Old Forester's doing that.
Yeah.
That they're doing a single barrel proof rye whiskey. Yeah. Heck, I can't wait to try that. I can't wait. Because I've had rye whiskey from them that I thought was pretty good, but I've never had anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's when somebody's doing something a little bit different like that I'm sign me up. Whatever that costs, I'm going to buy a bottle because I want to see what it tastes like. Yeah. We're spoiled, so I've had a lot of fine whiskey. Right? That's what I drink. I drink fine whiskey and not very good beer most of the time. Like $30 bottles of whiskey and, the cheapest beer you get, the dollar beer.
MGD for life.
Absolutely. So, but when I'm drinking something special, I want it to be different. Yeah. That's why I can't wait to drink that mezcal.
Need to make sure we'll make sure you get a bottle somehow. We have to make sure we get a bottle somehow. Yeah. I think Elijah had. Of course, this is off.
That's what I need. I need a good like person with a connect down there that can mule me some stuff over.
Yeah, we're working on it as well.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah.
I gotta go FaceTime my kid.
Everything okay?
I think everything's fine.
Okay.
I don't want to leave him hanging too long.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's say our thank yous.
Oh.
Or wait.
Yeah.
Are we still recording?
Thank you.
What's happening?
We're saying our thank yous.
Oh, we're saying our thank yous.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Editing. Sincere thanks to Bruce, not just for the time that he gave us for the interview, but the entire day and evening that we spent with him. Such an easy guy to hang out with. As I said leading into the interview, such an easy guy to talk spirits with. Passionate guy about spirits. And the day absolutely flew past.
I was really surprised to know that our pick was actually the first of the year. They had just opened up barrel picks again on premise, kind of on the DL, and he said, we're going to be opening it up more, but I want you guys to know you're the first. That I don't know, that makes me feel a little special, Jason.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to bungs that were popped and casks that were tasted and kind of what it looked like around the warehouse that really nobody had been in for a good 18 months.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that wild?
That's pretty remarkable to think about as well.
That's a good point, right? Because the last two barrels we picked, of course, we went to Wild Turkey to pick them, but it wasn't in the Rick House. It was in a part of the visitor center, so we couldn't even pick in the warehouse then. But we got to go back, and just such a special little place to be, by the river, near the bridge.
I also just want to throw in a very special thank you to Ryan Alves, who invited us into Justin's House of Bourbon. And we managed to get a hotel room just 2 blocks from Justin's House
Basically,
of Bourbon.
Yep.
That made for a jolly nice end to the day as well. And Ryan opened some real treats for us as well. And, 3 of which were our own releases, which and again, back to what I said earlier about the kind of the social nature of drinking the mezcal, drinking our last 2 wild turkey picks and drinking our undisclosed 24-year-old bourbon, all of which Ryan opened just for the celebration, was so cool, so very cool. And so Ryan, if you're listening, thanks ever so much for doing that and opening your doors, getting to hang out with Bruce in that environment as well.
Yep.
And then you and I just plodding back to our hotel room. Somewhat disappointingly, there was no final pint of beer. The beer establishment had closed down.
It had shut
while we're off
drinking
bourbon.
But I was also lobbying against it.
Yes, you were.
It was
foolishly.
It was a long day, Jason. It would have just ended in bad decisions.
But the more you
decisions.
lobby against a final beer, the more we have to find one. And then what did we do? Didn't we go back and drink?
We went back and drank a lot.
what did? Oh gosh, what was the sherry you brought? Manzanilla?
Yes, that's right. I brought. So I had purchased a couple bottles of this Manzanilla and Rama by Barbadillo, and it was one that our friend John Kay, right, Polish John, was really interested in, and so he and I actually went in on a few bottles of that, and about 12 or 18 other bottles, mostly variations of Manzanilla and Fino and some others, but that Manzanilla was just...
It was excellent.
Excellent. What a wonderful way to end the evening. But we also we had some cask samples that we had to go through and some things that you had tasted that you needed me to taste so we can get a green light on things or not get a green light on things. And so, we mentioned this in the podcast before. Normally when you and I select casks, we're doing it together. And we're doing it earlier in the day because that's when your palate is.
We're not doing it at 11:30 after a day of selecting casks and then drinking with friends.
However, I think we talked about this before. We enjoy tasting those cask samples at the end of the day too, because you want to see what that whiskey's doing on a spent palate, right? On just one that has had 3 meals and various drinks. Like, is it still quaffable? It's in the comparison that I made in a previous episode was you're a band going into a studio. You want to hear what your music sounds like on the best speakers in the world, and you want to hear what your music sounds like on the worst speakers in the world. And if you're comfortable with both, you have a gem. And the same rings true with whiskey. Taste it in the morning, taste it in the evening. Do you like it in both occasions? And
we heard that from Jane Bowie at Maker's Mark, where they talked about giving out samples to their team and saying, take it home.
Yep.
Drink it. Drink it of an evening. Drink it after dinner. Drink it before bed. Come back. Give us feedback. Tell us what you find when you do that.
Yep.
And so, the conditions certainly were not our normal conditions for selection, but they certainly put those samples through their paces after a few bourbons.
Correct. And you already vetted them. And so I got to taste them on the spent palate. So you tried them on with the good speakers. I tried them on with the bad speakers. And we both agreed we shall select those casks.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's great.
So
it was a blast.
So speaking of, I mean, I kind of feel like this is almost a segue into our own news segment. And I thought it would be good to share a little bit of news.
Bring us into the news, Mr. Sharer.
Extra, extra! Read all about it. Life story of Playboy Penny. Extra, extra! Extra, extra!
first bit of news for everybody, because we've talked about it on the podcast and, of course, on our Singlecast Nation members only Facebook page, which, by the way, if you're not a Singlecast Nation member, you can go to singlecastnation.com and sign up for a membership. It is free. You just email first name, last name, and you click become a member. I don't know what the button is, but anyway, you register to become a member, and then once you become a free member of Singlecast Nation, you gain access to our members only Facebook page, where we have a lot of these discussions, and we release information early and often on the Facebook page. So if you're a fan and you want to become a Nation member, please sign up and then join our Facebook group. So anyway, we've mentioned it on the podcast. We've mentioned it in Facebook. We've touched on it in email. But we've recently bottled our 2 Westland casks. And we're just waiting for our labels to arrive to the bottling hall. There's a bit of a delay on those. And once those are labeled, we'll ship it off to our warehouse and then open up sales. And so just a reminder of those 2 Westland casks. They're both 7 years old. One is a peated Westland, 7 years in ex-bourbon, and one is an unpeated Westland. It's their 5-malt mash bill, matured in a muscatel barrique. 2 very different whiskeys, 2 very exciting whiskeys. I simply cannot wait for those 2.
Yeah, we've been talking about these for a long time.
We have. I can say
Cannot
that
wait to release them.
I can say that Singlecast Nation retail release number 7 is starting to make its way onto store shelves. I know it just came into Chicago, and I saw it show up on warehouse liquor shelves. It'll be showing up on Benny shelves and in a few other places.
Yeah, Natalie and Liz, who we mention often up in Seattle, had reached out to say, where can I read more about this? And so that will be coming to the website by the time this episode goes live, actually. Mm-hmm. So you will be able to read up more of retail release number 7. The product shots, the lifestyle shots that are appearing on social media are remarkable, out of this world. Yeah. And the enthusiasm around number 7, I mentioned this previously, is excellent. I'm so excited.
So a couple things before we move on to other bits of news. We had Jose Milk actually reach out to us wanting to know when we were going to do our tasting videos, because he was really interested in the Westport, but wanted to get an understanding of the flavors. And of course, we publish our tasting notes, and those will show up on the website. But he's got a good point. We haven't done videos for this release, so that's something Jason and I will be working on.
I don't think we've ever done videos for a retail release.
I have done videos for them by myself, but I don't think it would hurt for us to do them jointly. And then we've had other people reach out to us wanting to know what our favorite was within the release number 7 range. And I don't know if you and I have actually talked about what our favorites are. So do you have a top 2, a top 3?
Yeah, actually, Elijah did a market visit in the good state of Oregon last week. He worked his way around some various fires and managed to make it to some really great accounts. And he was asking me over text some of my favorites. And then a Good Nation member, Nicholas Raba, I'm not sure how else to pronounce R-A-B-A, but here we are. Apologies if I got it wrong.
It's actually pronounced Schwartz. That's the funny thing.
That checks out. That Goldstein. It makes perfect sense. He'd reached out and said, I've access to the Milk and Honey and the Blair Athol. Which do you recommend?
Jeepers.
And, obviously he's reached out to a co-owner of the company. The answer is both. But here's what else I said in my answer, because I try not to be flip. I like to be funny, but I try not to be flip. And so after I'd said both, I said the Milk and Honey, and this is a funny thing to say about such a young distillery.
I want to hear if you told him what I tell other people. So this is good. So go on.
Okay. the milk and honey does exactly what you expect the milk and honey to do. And that's why it's interesting to me to say that about such a young distillery. For me, milk and honey is just doing such wonderful work that I'm looking at a consistency. When we sample casks, there's such a consistency to what we're sampling.
Yep.
That to put that milk and honey into a bottle and release it as part of the 7th release was easy. An easy decision, right? It's another consistent milk and honey cask. Buy it, enjoy it. You won't be disappointed. It'll do what you've come to expect from that distillery. But I told him if he could only buy one of the two, pick up the Blair Athol. Because the Blair Athol is surprising. And then what I said to Elijah, the Blair Athol is the one that I return to, where I'm just kind of like, really? Really, Blair Athol? You're doing this?
Yep.
Huh.
Yep.
Didn't expect that. So it's interesting to have, milk and honey just be good and reliable and you know what you're getting, and Blair Athol being such a surprise.
So this is interesting. I have a different approach. So firstly, I have 3 favorites. Three standouts to me. They're all excellent. There's no doubt about it. And even the Inchgauer, which I think is more up your alley and a bit less up my alley, because there is some of that wine cask finishing, that port cask, but you get a bit more of a winey presence to it. I'm still getting some of those like incensey kind of notes from the Inchgauer, which I love. So the distillery character is still there, and I think it's doing, for folks who love Inchgauer, it's doing Inchgauer and then offering a bit more on top of that. So I do like that. I know you like it more than me, but I do like it. But
very quickly before you reveal, this is a podcast, and our listeners sadly can only hear. But given what I just said about the Blair Athol, watch my hand. Right, I'm reaching out for my desk here. Right, look how far my hand has gone.
There it is. It's right there. And you
look what I've
zipped
lifted
your
up.
pants and what? Put the Blair Athol samples. Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
I've got
No, it's right
Blair
there.
Athol sitting 18 inches from me. I won't tell you how I measured that so precisely. So the Blair Athol, it's just there, right? That's the returner. Continue now.
I'm just glad the tape measure I bought you for Hanukkah last year is gone to good use. So I do have 3 favorites, and one of them you won't be surprised by. The other one, I share your opinion. I really think Blair Athol is the standout of the bunch, and in part because it's doing stuff you don't normally expect Blair Athol to do. It's being louder and prouder. Blair Athol tends to be a bit softer, a bit understated, and this is saying, no, this is, you need to pay attention to me right now because I also do these things, right? And I like that a lot.
And I like Blair Athol.
Oh, I love Blair. I love how understated it could be. Like, I like those bit more subtle whiskeys. I mean, you know this, and I appreciate that you love that as well, right? So that's my top one. My second favorite, which I thought would be my first favorite, but it's my second favorite. I
know you're going to say Westport.
It's the Westport. It's the 16-year-old Westport. And I think it's a remarkable
Highland
whiskey.
Distillery somewhere near Tain, I believe.
Somewhere near Tain. There might be 16 men working there.
Yeah,
But you know what?
13, 18, who's counting?
To be honest, I hope they open it up and include some women of Tain. Anyway.
I hope so.
Right?
I hope so, too.
And I mean, I don't know how many people of color the town of Tain has, but I do hope that they be a bit more inclusive.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Sorry,
Anyway.
I was just lifting up the Inchgauer sample. I don't know if you were expecting me to do something with what I've got in my hand here, but I'm gripping the Inchgauer.
But my third favorite is the milk and honey. And how I talk about the milk and honey is worlds apart from how you talk about milk and honey. Worlds apart. Do you know why?
Because you've been there?
Well, I mean, that aside. No, because because I actually disagree with you. I don't think the milk and honey is doing what people who drink milk and honey, I don't think it's doing what they would expect. And the reason why I don't think it's doing what they would or should expect, Milk and Honey's own Elements peated bottling is whiskey that was matured in casks that previously held peated spirit, right? So you know what that's doing if you've had Milk and Honey before. You know what their peated stuff is doing. But the retail cask, our 3-year-old Milk and Honey is from peated malt and not from a peated cask. So you're getting what you expect from there's a consistency of quality, but there are different flavors being presented because this is a peated whiskey from the malt being peated and not from the unpeated spirit matured in a cask that previously held peated spirit. And I don't know of any other Milk and Honey single cask that was released as a peated malt release. We may be one of the first, which has me really excited, and I love what that peated malt is doing. So I kind of see what you're saying, where we did a special M&H bottling of a 3-year-old from an ex-Isla cask, and we did that for our distributor, Prestige LaDroit, who handles D.C., Maryland, and Delaware. And so from that standpoint, I think that one is a bit more consistent of what people think of when it comes to Milk and Honey and Milk and Honey being matured in a peated cask. And I think maybe in the back of your head you got the two of those confused because it's easy to do that, but
I stand by what I'm saying about this consistency, right? That this consistency of quality, and
yes,
right. And listeners cannot see you nodding and smiling over the FaceTime here, but right, it doesn't really matter what cask you put in front of me for Milk and Honey. I know that it's going to live up to what Milk and Honey does day in and day out.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you bring that up. It reminds me of our conversation with John McClellan, right, when he was with Kilhoman before he had passed, and we were given some cask samples, and his comment to us was, because we had only gotten a few samples, and his comment to us was, yeah, but it's all consistent.
Yeah, right.
And we had taken his comment to mean they're all going to taste the same. But that wasn't his comment. His comment was and we didn't get it at the time. His comment was really, you can trust that the quality is consistent regardless of the cask. And I think that's your statement here. You can trust in the consistency of the quality, but where this particular retail release number 7 differs is that this is the peated malt. So you're presented with slightly different flavors than you're used to when it comes to Milk and Honey, if you've had Milk and Honey before.
And Czech peat at that.
And Czech Republic. I almost said Czechoslovakian peat, but there is no more Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, we're back to 1986 there.
They peated that malt in a Yugo. That's the weird thing.
So when I was a boy growing up, my parents got a Lada, Lada, a Lada, and boy, I was 14 years old, and life's already tough when you're 14. I now have a 14-year-old in the house, which is difficult every day. And my parents drove us around town in this baby blue Lada. Oh boy, that was tough. I think it was one of the first new cars my parents ever bought, and Lada was cheap as chips. I think the only thing cheaper than a Lada was a Skoda. And the Skodas. So when you mention a Yugo, right? You mention a Yugo, it gets me thinking Lada, it gets me thinking Skoda.
Yeah. I've
those
always
Eastern European cars that made their way to the United Kingdom, they were not appealing.
I've always been scared of heights, so you'd never find me climbing a ladder. I just kind of just stay away from them. As, you know.
I would say no dad joke too low, but in this instance, it was a dad joke that was not too high.
So I mentioned my three favorite. Do you have?
Yes.
I want to hear what the ones you love. I imagine listeners might be curious if they're making a buying decision.
Wow. Well, certainly our U.S. listeners. And
that's a very good point. Yeah, we are talking.
Antipodean listeners are asking us to expand our markets.
I had someone from the Congo just reach out to me,
kind.
and he's upset.
I tell you, if we can't make it in China, there's no point in having a company. So.
If we can make it in Inner Mongolia, we can make it anywhere.
This is why our partnership works. You always pick up what I'm putting down, and that's exactly what I was putting down. So clearly the Blair Athol is
that your standout?
There.
That's your number one?
Yeah, it's the one I keep going back to. Yeah.
If
you make me identify a top three, the Blair Athol's going to be there. I can't get away from it, partly because, like you said a moment ago, the Blair Athols that come across our desks tend to be ex-bourbon. And here's a Blair Athol in a sherry butt. Mm-hmm. And I think that elevates it. We've said it so many times, and I continue to say it all the time. You and I love single malts in fresh bourbon barrels.
That's our go-to.
Bourbon hoggies, right? It's the bourbon maturation of single malt that we really, really love. But I think the sherry butt component of this really does good work.
It elevates
that's all I'm ever looking for.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Is the cask putting in time and effort here. Mm-hmm. Check. So that definitely works for me. The Inchgour, I like the way you talk about it. The Linkwood for me is position 2. And I told you when we were selecting these, and it really fits in with the theme of today's episode, that Linkwood is poundable, right?
Yeah.
Just
so
keep
fresh.
pouring it. And
it's so fresh.
Right? And I know there's a hashtag, please drink responsibly, that we always revert back to. But that Linkwood, when we selected that, my comment was, pop the cork on a Friday, recycle the bottle on a Monday. It's just a drinker. It's an absolute drinker.
Assuming you're spending a weekend with friends and not just alone in a room on the internet. Yeah, you don't want to be there. You don't want to be that person.
I would happily drink a bottle of that over a weekend, but at least with at least one other friend, if I could find one. So,
okay.
Yeah, I really like that Linkwood. That was obvious to me during the selection. The Westport is tickety boo, and the Westport, I
is that your number 3? Are you about to announce
it is
that?
not. No,
oh, okay.
No, I'm not. The thing for me, and I've said this about the tasting note pickled walnuts. I like it when I can taste something and it makes me think of Joshua. And I've told people I still haven't had pickled walnuts, right? But I will nose a whiskey, I will taste a whiskey, I will say pickled walnuts because I know the moments at which you say pickled walnuts. And so when this Westport came across the desk, and obviously this is from a distillery that you are a long-time fan of. We've interviewed Dr. Bill Lumsden plenty of times now, 2 parts, part 3 coming. And I know what this distillery is doing. And I was really happy that we could finally get a release from this distillery under the Single Cask Nation livery. So it was an achievement.
Here's the difference, though. Here's the difference, though. You understand what the distillery is doing, but I don't think you necessarily understand what the distillery is capable of. And so I think that this cask is just giving you the slightest peek behind what that distillery is capable of, because it is softer, it's a bit lighter, it's a bit more on the floral side, which means it's a bit more malleable, But when done right, when done second fill sherry, all of a sudden, kind of like with our not the liquid, with the Blair Athol, where the sherry cask elevated the Blair Athol spirit.
Yeah.
I think the sherry cask is elevating that Westport spirit, the spirit from that distillery located somewhere around the town of Tain, where 16 men happen to hang out, and Glenn loves more oranges. You know, it's. You've had
first we could park in the Highlands, and now Glenn loves more oranges.
You've had. If I were to guess,
I feel like Nick Cage in National Treasure trying to solve these riddles that keep coming down upon me.
I would guess in your life you may have had 12 whiskeys from this distillery, if that.
Oh no, I've had a lot more whiskey.
Have you had more? Really?
Oh yeah.
Well, you haven't had enough. There's a lot to be discovered there. There's a lot to be discovered there. Anyway.
I can appreciate them without reaching for them.
So what is your number 3 then? What's your number 3?
This is tough. I always hate it when we reach the finite moment. I like 1, I like 2. That's easy because you still got 3 to come.
Where's the bronze
once
medal,
you get
Jason?
once you get to 3, there's not another one after that. Like, how can I turn my back on Milk and Honey, right? I love what they're doing. I love what they're producing. I love what they're putting out there. I love their maturation. I love what they're doing with casks. I'll say this. Position 3 for me would be a toss-up between the Milk and Honey and the Dumbarton.
Ooh,
because I'm not gonna. I can't not give props to grain.
I know,
and it's
and
right. It's Dumbarton and a
distillery, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Here's something funny. This is why we're not salespeople, because I'm going to tell you something that doesn't help sell our products. But Joshua's thinking, wait till I get this into post-production.
Oh,
how do I say?
Here we go. This is where the company ends,
said
Jason.
to what we say next.
This is where the company folds.
So I told you this previously, and I've told Elijah and Jess this. I did a grain tasting for my Palouse Whiskey Society. Mm-hmm. And I love grain, and you love grain, and Elijah and Jess love grain, and we talk about grain all the time, and we bottled grain, and we sell grain, and our nation seems to love grain. My society up in the Palouse, in the Northwest, Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho, they said it all smelled like hand sanitizer. They had gone through COVID, where people now have hand sanitizer in their cars. People have it walking into stores. People have it on countertops. People are spritzing neutral grain spirit constantly. And that freshness, brightness, sometimes orange component, orange water, orange gumdrops can be present in hand sanitizer. And we've now existed in a world where hand sanitizer has become so ubiquitous, it has affected how people interact. Some people, questionable people, I will say, people of questionable character.
Your society members, go on. Yeah.
Some of them have had grain spirit ruined for them. And that makes me so sad because... we were pouring 1974 Invergordon, 1973 Dumbarton, 1990s Port Dundas.
That's magical stuff.
Right. And so I remain squarely in the camp of grain whiskey. And I am absolutely going to go to bat for our hoggy of Dumbarton.
I think it's such a remarkable grain. Dumbarton has a presence to it. It has a bit of heft to it that I've always loved. Both Dumbarton and North British seem to have a bit of heft to it that the other ones don't seem to have. And I just think it was such a remarkable cask of whiskey. And I think from the perspective of the whiskey drinker that is interested in trying stuff from distilleries that have been shuttered, that simply don't produce anymore. tasting a bit of history is a great thing. Sharing history with friends.
Well, and I keep saying, if you're a bourbon lover and you're a fan of column still distillation, but you want to see a difference from new charred oak to refill wood,
You actually want to taste the grain?
Scottish grain whiskey is the way to go.
Yep.
You should absolutely be exploring that. And I've said that to friends in Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia. You know, you guys are all so close to Kentucky. Explore Scottish grain whiskey, and fun things will happen.
Especially for those American whiskey drinkers who've been turned on to light whiskey, whether it was through High West, through ourselves, or any other bottler. If you've found a beauty in light whiskey, follow that. Go to Scottish grain whiskey, because you're going to find similar flavors there. Light whiskey is basically America's version of Scottish grain whiskey. It really is.
Exactly. I've been saying it for years. Yep, absolutely. So, whether it's Blair Athol, Westport, Inchgower, Linkwood, Dumbarton, Milk and Honey peated malt, or the Prestige LeDroy East Coast Mid-Atlantic
So
Ex Isla
excited for
Cask
that
Milk
cask.
and Honey.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a good solid 7th release.
Yep.
Really
Yeah.
happy. Really happy.
So, is there anything else to add to the news segment? I mean, we kind of chitter-chattered through the news segment. What do you have to
I
add?
wanted you to talk a bit about this cigar. You did the cigar podcast yesterday.
Thank you.
What's the
Right.
release date, first and foremost?
So here's the thing. People listening to this podcast on Wednesday, the 28th of July, will know that these cigars have been on sale now for 2 days. And actually, by the time this podcast launches, the cigar may be sold out. And I do apologize.
probably.
But we have talked about it in a previous podcast. We've been mentioning it all over the place on Facebook. So we worked once again with Aganorsa Leaf and Two Guys Cigars out of New Hampshire. And so what we did is we sent a cask, an empty cask that previously held Tennessee bourbon, a 14-year-old Tennessee bourbon. It was part of our Pappy Nonsense release. We sent that cask over to Aganorsa Leaf. They created a cigar, matured the whole cigar in the cask. They actually matured 2,000 of these cigars in the cask, and they then did a box press of this cigar. So you've got this lovely cigar that's both Tennessee bourbon aged and a box press. And I smoked it yesterday with the folks from Two Guys. I smoked it with our cigar czar, Yoni Miller, who really is the mastermind. I mean, you and I are the whiskey guys.
Oh, he is.
Yoni's our
We do not
cigar
touch
guy.
the cigar stuff.
Right, we enjoy cigars, but he's a cigar. As much as we're whiskey nerds, he's a cigar nerd, and he worked with the Aganorsa guys. And Terrence over there at Aganorsa Leaf has been such a wonderful partner. And so anyway, there was 2,000 sticks made, so 200 boxes of 10. And those went on sale on Monday, July 26th at 10 a.m. However, Single Cast Nation members, you may remember I suggested to people become a member of Single Cast Nation. Single Cast Nation members actually got the link 2 hours before the rest of the country did. Right? So these are some of the benefits that you get to being a Single Cast Nation member. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you go to twoguyscigar.com and you search for Single Cast Nation, there is a chance that these could be sold out. But there's also a chance they're not sold out yet. So go ahead, go to twoguyscigars.com, check it out, see if it's there. If it's not there and it's sold out, A, I apologize. B, their selections are phenomenal. If you're a cigar smoker, I tell you, Jason, I was in their main store in Salem, and it was just remarkable just going through their store and their massive walk-in humidor. all the big brands, the Davidoffs of the world, and the Aganorsas, and you name it, they have it, and they have their own proprietary blends as well. These are guys that give a shit about cigars, and so if you like cigars, Two Guys is, I think, worth checking out. Regardless of our partnership
podcast?
with them, just as a cigar fan. I'm sorry, what did you say?
What was it like being on a cigar podcast?
That was weird, man. It was weird. It was weird because of this, Jason. I'll tell you. So it was a podcast, but B, there was also a live video portion of it, and so Yoni and I were in the first hour of the video portion, and so I'm the type of cigar smoker. Well, I smoke more cigars than you do these days. I would say I maybe smoke 12 cigars per year. And that's not necessarily one cigar a month. That could be 3 cigars in a month. And then I go a couple months and then I do another. You know what I mean? It kind of runs.
Do you smoke them alone or only in company?
Only in company. No, take that back. Sometimes if I'm just hanging outside, it's me and Haida. We've got a fire going. I always ask, do you mind if I light up a cigar? And she's like, no, you do you. She doesn't mind the cigar smoke, which is very nice. And sometimes it's just nice to have it alone, just hanging out with Haida, just being outside, enjoying the fresh air. But mostly I enjoy it with friends. And mostly, here was the interesting thing, Jason. Mostly I enjoy it without the accompaniment of whiskey, because I feel as if the cigar ruins the whiskey experience. And but being on this podcast and tasting our cigar, and I had opened one of my bottles. I had 2 bottles. I had opened one of my bottles of Pappy Nonsense to taste along with it, and it was really nice. Jonathan, not Yoni, but the other Jonathan, basically taught me how to pair the two. To show what smoke would do to the whiskey and what whiskey would do to the smoke, and when to take the sip and why to take the sip at that certain point. And then I was able to discover how that cigar could elevate the whiskey in particular ways. I think it still interferes with your overall experience, but I think there are ways in which you can use that smoke to elevate the whiskey, but also use the whiskey to elevate the cigar as well.
And that's what I was about to say to you a moment ago, which is I wouldn't write off the experience whole cloth. The right whiskey with the right cigar can be absolutely phenomenal. Get it wrong, however,
yes,
and it's like a deflated balloon,
right? And
the whole enterprise is a non-starter.
But right, and so the good news is, smoking this cigar with the Pappy Nonsense whiskey, the fact that there was a definite and clear connection of whiskey in the bottle to cigar in hand, it really elevated the whole experience. So if those two didn't work together, I think we'd be in a whole lot of trouble. But they did work together. But you know what I found out, and I thought that this was interesting. What I found out through Terrence at Aganorsa was the common procedure of cask aging tobacco is specifically that, cask aging tobacco, and then you use that tobacco to then build your cigar. But Aganorsa Leaf took a different approach. They built the cigar and then matured the whole cigar in the cask for a period of time. They actually had to create a shelving system within the cask to house the cigars in there. And they found that they couldn't leave the cigars in there for too long because the moisture was so intense, and because tobacco is so porous, they just became wet and gross and way too boozy and didn't smoke right. So they're just in there for a very short period of time, just sponging in that Tennessee bourbon. And so it was Barry Barry Bellevue, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's the Cigar Authority guy. And so he liked our first cigar, but he thought it leaned a bit too much on the bourbony, or actually it's a rye whiskey, so more on the rye side of things and less cigar. So he thought it was a bit he liked it, but it was a bit unbalanced as from a cigar smoker's standpoint. But this one, he thought it was a perfect balance between the bourbon and the tobacco from a smoker's standpoint. Yeah. So it was.
Gosh, I thought our first round of cigars were absolutely spot on, and maybe as a whiskey drinker, I thought that.
I'm sorry. Say that once again.
The first round
Yeah.
that we released
Yes.
were spot on.
You thought that they were spot on. I did too. But here's the thing.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
As whiskey drinkers,
As whiskey drinkers, it was perfect. It was spot on. But after having tasted this new cigar, our second cigar, I see what he meant. I really do see what he meant. And what I enjoyed was, and I think this kind of goes to Aganorsa leaf in general. Our first cigar was great because throughout the entire stick, you got that rye presence. It never went away. But Aganorsa cigars take you on this ride where it's like peppery and spicy, and then it gets sweet, and then it gets velvety, and then it gets earthy, and then it gets spicy again. And like it's that hour and a half, and you're taken on a journey. And the first time around, I think the alcohol kind of leveled out that journey. Where in this cigar, I think the alcohol followed that journey. Does that make sense?
Now 100%. But now I'm intrigued because when I was smoking our first release of cigars, that's exactly what I was describing to people. This Robusto will do one thing for the first third, it'll do another thing for the second third, and it'll do another thing in the last third. And in that last third, it became very cigar-like for me.
Yeah.
And that last third was the part at which I would get a little lightheaded. And if I hadn't eaten, if I wasn't hydrated, if I'd maybe drunk a little bit too much whiskey along the way to that last third, if I hadn't taken a break halfway, it was a big cigar. But I absolutely found it broken down into thirds and communicated that to friends.
Interesting. Yeah, I think once you get this cigar in your hand, I think you'll see the stark differences. And I think in part it being a box press, it becomes a different experience as well. The draw is different. How it smokes is a bit different. And to be fair, the tobacco is the same. It's constructed the same way. It's a different size. It's not a Robusto anymore. It's a slightly larger cigar. But then it's also been box pressed. But it's not a traditional box press as well. If you think of your box press cigars, you have very sharp lines on a box press. This is more rounded. This is kind of an in-between a round cigar and a box press. You'll get your box, and actually, let's have a smoke together. I think we'll appreciate the differences between the two. And for those listening who are cigar smokers, hopefully you're on our Facebook page, or hopefully you listened to previous podcasts where we've been talking about this, and we'll be emailing people about this, or by the time this is released, we will have emailed people about this. But for the cigar smokers out there, I hope they do buy this second iteration. I think it's a wonderful addition to what we've done, and it shows a different side to what we can do in collaboration with these partners, with Aganorsa and with the two guys. I'm so excited. And it was the last thing I'll say, because you asked me how the experience was. What I loved during the course of the conversation, and anybody listening can go and just go to the Cigar Authority in YouTube, and you'll find the video there. What I loved about this conversation with me and Yoni and the guys with Cigar Authority is we found the links between the whiskey industry and the cigar industry, and they're not tenuous. They really aren't. There are clear links and reasons for why what they do and how they do it, and reasons for what we do and how we do it. And it's quite clear. And you can say, oh, what you do is similar to what I do because of A, B, and C. And what I do is similar to what you do because of, D, E, and F. And that was fun. And last thing I'll say, Jason. Balancer, who we've mentioned multiple times on the podcast,
Indeed,
Massachusetts guy, drove up to New Hampshire to watch the live recording.
Oh, good man.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah, good
So
man.
lovely
Great
to
support.
see him. Yeah, great supporter. And just a lovely guy. And there was a woman named Pamela there as well who discovered us through our first cigar and then became a Single Cask Nation member and started purchasing our whiskeys. And she was just so lovely to talk to. And I brought a bottle of our Pappy Nonsense. I brought a bottle of our Stones of Stenness 17-year-old to taste, and got to pour that for her, both of them for her and for Balancer as well. So, yeah, it was a good time.
The new collaborative Stones of Stenness 17-year-old.
Yes, with Water of Life film, that indeed. Oh, yeah, yep.
I cannot wait to get my box. I'm really excited to see what the new cigar is doing.
Samesies. So, yeah, you. When I say samesies, I mean I can't wait for you to get it because I think you'll find what I found. But mostly, I want you to get it, and then you and I are going to get together, and we're going to have a night. We're going to have a long night. Filled with cigars and manzanilla and mezcal and wild turkey bourbon and Playboy. Can I tell you really quickly, Jason? I think our listeners will appreciate this story. So I say this all the time. You know how we have certain things that we say to one another that just make sense? There's a certain thing that Haida and I say to one another that just makes sense. There was this guy that I went to school with, Leroy. He was one of these guys that everybody loved. He was one of he had learning disabilities, somewhere on the autism spectrum. But this is going to the school in the 80s and 90s, but they were incorporating him into the classes, and he just becomes sort of the friend to everyone. And he was such a lovely guy. I absolutely loved him. But during lunch, I would sit with him, and he would hang out, and he'd always tell this story, and he would say, I'm going to have a party at my house. We're going to have Commodore 64. We're going to have Topps baseball cards. We'll do the baseball card game. We're going to do this, and we're going to have Playboys. I'm like, dude, okay, I was with you until he said we're going to have Playboys. Just the idea of reading Playboys with a bunch of friends just seemed, reading the articles of Playboy with friends just didn't seem to make sense. But I don't know if
You
that...
had me at Commodore 64. I was a Commodore 64 kid.
Did you have a favorite game?
When I was
14,
I had a Commodore 64.
Did you have a favorite game?
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you had a favorite game. What was your favorite game? Do you remember?
It's not going to make any sense to you. That's why I didn't continue.
Go ahead. What is it?
It was called Emmeline Hughes Soccer. And Emmeline Hughes was a famous Welsh soccer player.
Oh, interesting.
I believe played his club soccer with Liverpool. And so just like you get any celebrity sports person endorsement of a game, this was his Commodore 64
and
sports
that's early on. Like Commodore 64, that's 80s. When are
I was 14, yeah.
You were 14. You were born in 74, 1988. Like 88. That's early on for the sports.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Emmeline Hughes Soccer, and the graphics were terrible, and the colors were terrible, and the gameplay was terrible. But my brother and I just sat and played it for hours upon hours. I tried to explain this to my own kids the other day about loading a game from tape. And I felt like I was describing something from the 18th century, let alone the 19th, the 20th, the 21st.
Back in my day.
They had no concept of loading a game from tape. And then the noise it would make, it sounded like a fax machine when you were loading your game from tape.
Wait a second. Commodore 64 wasn't a tape-loaded game, though. Tandy was tape-loaded.
No, Commodore 64 was tape
Was
loading.
it tape? I don't remember it being tape-loaded.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got no other words except for absolutely.
All right, listeners.
How the fuck else are you uploading the game to what?
I thought that
How were you doing it?
I thought that it was a disc or a cartridge.
Commodore 64?
Yeah, I thought it was a
It was
disc.
a personal computer.
Which is why I thought it was a disc in 1988.
Oh, no, sir.
Right?
No,
85, you're at Tandy with your Tandy 1000, but I think we'd gotten to the point where we're at those 5-inch or 5.8-inch discs.
Oh, interesting. I will say, listeners are loving this. In the summer of my 14th year, I went on vacation with a friend of mine. I was Scottish.
Yeah, watching
she
share
was English.
videos. Important time in your
Her
life.
father was English. He had an Atari, and his Atari was disc.
Wait a second.
Atari personal computer, not Atari
not the
gaming
2600.
system.
Atari personal computer. I don't remember that. B, I wonder if that was a UK only thing.
Well, he had a baseball game on disc that I played.
It makes me
that
wonder if
summer.
your Commodore was different from our Commodore.
Well, our master system was certainly different from your Genesis.
Well, anyway, I don't even know how we got
Podcast
into
listeners
this.
are loving
Yeah,
this.
they're loving this. My favorite Commodore 64 game was Wizard's Crown.
You've mentioned this previously.
So good. So good. I found an emulator online. That game is fucking terrible. It was so terrible. But
Was that the prequel or the sequel to Wizard's Sleeve?
there is like one guy living in his basement that knows that reference. Actually, no. Anyone watching Borat should know that reference.
Everyone in the UK is loving this.
Anyway. What
What are we doing here? How did we get here?
I don't know how we got there, but we do need to. I do want to read
Finish probably.
because we're done with news. We've been done with news for a while, but I do want to read.
Mezcal have you drunk from your Hikari?
I'm not going to lie to you, Jason. I am 4 mezcals in, and I feel fantastic.
Yeah, I've got Jabali Recampero. I've got Mexicano Recampero.
But we received a message, a Facebook message from someone, a Scottish gentleman, by the way, Jason.
It's a great intro. we got this thing from someone, but he was in Scotland, so
we got this thing, and I wanted to read it to you, and you'll understand why I want to read it to you specifically.
anytime you say we've got something from a Scottish person, I'm always like, here it comes. Here's the attack on Jason's Scottishness. Now that he's lived in the United States since 2001, and December of 2001 at that, I'm always waiting on the questions coming in. Like, he's not a real Scotsman.
Right,
Isn't how he talks.
So it's interesting. I responded to this person, but he hasn't read it yet. So you know what? Maybe after he hears this episode, he'll read my response. So we got a Facebook message from a gentleman by the name of Ian Bruce, and that's IAIN Bruce.
In keeping with the episode with Bruce Russell.
Right? Or in keeping with previous episodes, Ian Allen with the IAIN. There you go. So his message starts off, and you ready? It says, "Fit like Shields."
Oh, well done. Yes.
CHEILS. And he had said since
So
you
we've got somebody from the northeast of Scotland here.
it says, since you don't really care for proper English, I thought I'd start off with some Doric.
Yep, fit.
So what does fit like shields mean in Doric?
How you doing? What you up to? What's happening with you?
So fit and like,
Fit's what?
I understand these words. Like,
So you know my story, fit.
I don't.
Doric speaker goes to the Swiss Alps. They're with a ski instructor.
Right.
And they turn to the ski instructor, who's obviously Swiss and obviously speaks perfect English, and says to the ski instructor, fits. Which foot fits which foot? They were putting on their ski boots. So as soon as you give me fit like here, yeah, we're ready. I'm ready with the Northeast. Let's do this.
Oh, that's so great. Okay, so there you go. So how you doing? So he says, anyways, been loving the podcasts, and then the Isla episode. You're gonna like this, Jason. And the Isla episodes on Series 1 were great, as visiting the island at the same time made it more engaging. So that's cool. Awesome. He's on Isla. He's listening to our episodes of being on Isla, right? That's very cool.
Yeah, Ian Bruce.
Ian Bruce. And so he goes on. He's got 2 first names, Jason. Right? But Bruce is such a strong Scottish name. Who is
Ian?
Yeah.
Ian is Gaelic for John. Did you know that?
Is it?
Yeah. Look at that. See, we've known each other for over a decade, and I can still surprise you with some truth bombs.
Manischewitz. I like that.
Yeah, I had a friend in high school called Ian, Iain, Gaelic for John.
Was that his last name? Gaelic for John? What's his tartan like?
To be honest, I had a friend called Scott McCracken. His nickname was Phil.
I had a friend named Ben Dover. That's another story.
White Cliffs.
What's that? Anita Bath?
No, what's her name? She just actually died not too long ago. 102, 103 years old. White Cliffs of Dover. Very famous song associated with the Second World War.
Yeah.
So,
and she died?
Ben Dover. White Cliffs of Dover.
Ben was her son's
Vera Lynn.
name. Yeah.
Vera Lynn, White Cliffs of Dover. Carry on.
So he goes on. Visiting Ardnahoe the afternoon after hearing about your visit to the work site and standing up Jim McEwen just felt special after seeing the view in the still room as well as viewing the open-topped worm tubs.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember standing up Jim McEwen. I know we had a tasting with him and we interviewed him.
We were an hour late, 90 minutes late.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, we didn't stand him up. We were just very, very late. And Bryony Boyd covered for us.
She's wonderful. And you
pro
said,
level.
You kept on saying, Isla time.
Isla time. Had he left?
He hadn't left. He hadn't left.
He hadn't left. They were just catching up. They spent the time catching up.
And so Ian continues, and this is the last paragraph. He says, just wanted to relay back a huge thank you for so much info and interesting and enjoyable chats to help develop my knowledge and love for whiskey, as well as being more intrigued to try some more, are you ready for this? American bourbons.
Yay! American bourbon! Get away from me!
And says, cheers, bourbon. Ian Bruce. So, Ian, thank you so much. What a wonderful note to get.
That's brilliant. For the benefit of Ian and our listeners, I was updating our cask lists the other day, and we have a category in our internal spreadsheets that is American bourbon, and I smile every time I fill out our internal spreadsheets with American bourbon.
Do you prefer Japanese bourbon over American bourbon?
American bourbon!
So you Mexican bourbon over American bourbon.
I love it. Makes me so happy.
But you know what? I kind of get it, right? I mean, here's a weird thing, Jason. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I'm going to tell you and I'm going to tell the listener. There's something about when people refer to Scotch whiskey as Scotch that annoys the living crap out of me.
Used to affect me in the same way. I unlocked what they were trying to do, and now I live quite comfortably within it.
Yeah, I just want to hear whiskey. Like it's whiskey.
I used to be exactly there with you. Exactly.
So,
and I'll tell you this.
Yeah,
we talked about my Police Society earlier, and I've got a very, very dear friend, Carl England, who's
Uncle
just
Carl.
a wonderful... Uncle Carl, exactly correct. Uncle Carl. And for years, in first knowing Carl, I would talk about single malt. I would talk about whiskey. And Carl would always say Scotch. Always. And
that bugged you? Did it bug you?
And it did. It did.
Yeah, okay.
For somebody that I love and cherish dearly, it was always a little bit of the nails on the chalkboard for me.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could get him to stop saying that. I wish I could get him to say single malt. And he never has. And I've now known him for 20 years, right? And he's such a wonderful dude, and I love him dearly. And once I unlocked what he was communicating with his word Scotch, it just flowed from me. All of the tension, all of the annoyance, that little bugbear, it just washed from me.
Okay, so what was he conveying? What was that? What was the aha moment for you?
The same thing that I'm conveying and Ian Bruce is conveying with American bourbon. It's giving kudos to the geography of it. It's saying, this is your thing. This is your product. And you would say single malt, and you and I have got friends in American single malt. Single malt means a lot to me. American single malt means a lot to me.
Okay.
Scottish, Welsh,
doing
Israeli,
things.
Australian,
doing different things.
right? Single malt doesn't say nearly as much as Scotch. And once I really grasped that, I was like, that's really nice. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm really on board with what he's holding on to dearly with Scotch.
So I'm going to give Uncle Carl a pass here. but
he doesn't care.
So the reason why I still have an issue with it, Carl's example is a very good example of someone who knows things and can say Scotch and it has a very specific meaning. But if we go 50,000 feet up to look at everybody else who is saying Scotch, you know, again, back to this equation of 88 to 90% of all Scotch whiskey is blends, and most of the people drinking those blends don't know what they're drinking. Those are the people that are saying, give me a Scotch. Like if you just go to a bar and say, give me a Scotch, that is the worst thing to ask for because there is not a single category that is more diverse than Scotch whiskey is, be it through single malt, be it through single grain, be it through blended malt, blended grain, blends, etc. And so it's that more ubiquitous use of Scotch that I have a problem with.
But it's funny to me that you call that the 50,000 feet up view. To me, your point is the head of the pin view, right? For those who know, who are in a very, very, very small clique, We know this category, huge, vast, multi-dimensional, right? As a Scotsman, when someone from that 50,000 feet view says Scotch, you've just talked about my country.
Yeah,
You've represented my country.
That's the difference,
right?
yeah.
What annoys me is when someone asks if I've got any of that Japanese Scotch.
Yes.
Now you've demonstrated you don't actually know what Scotch means. Right? The word Scotch has stopped meaning anything in that moment.
And so this is my larger point, is that a good number of those people that I'm looking at from a 50,000 foot distance are people who would say, let me try that Japanese Scotch. I heard it's so good. Let me try some of your Irish Scotch. I heard it's great. Oh my gosh, the Israelis are making Scotch now, right? That is the more common term. People are using it incorrectly. And so for me, you know me, I like sometimes to a fault and sometimes to my own fault, because I can't live up to this standard, but I really do enjoy specificity. And this is why I don't like the word barrel being used, because barrel is being used the same way Band-Aid and Xerox are being used, and that's not the case.
But here's the thing. There are times when people are purposely mistaken. There are times when people are accidentally mistaken. And if I meet somebody who's trying to talk about a wooden vessel that holds whiskey, and instead of using cask, which I know to be the generic term, they use barrel, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with somebody.
Them? You don't just want to cut them.
No, that's
just want to sweep the leg,
right?
At any point.
But what I'm going to say to them is, I really take your point. I'm glad we could have this conversation. FYI, for your information, or BTW. By the way, I always say cask because it's generic. And when you said barrel a moment ago, you made me think of a particular size.
Yes.
But I think what you were communicating was just a vessel.
Yeah.
So in future, if you remember, if this world means anything to you, use cask going forward.
Yeah.
And so if someone asks me for that Japanese Scotch, I'm going to say, listen, I'm glad you're interested in the category, but let me tell you why Japanese Scotch is a non-starter. There's this world of Scotch and what that means for me in my country. But then there's also this Japanese single malt and this Japanese whiskey world that you'll want to go and explore, but you'll want to use these words instead. The problem for me is when I've had that conversation with somebody once, twice, 3 times, and they're still talking about Japanese Scotch.
Yeah.
Then we've got a problem. Now you're just trying to get the world to bend to your will. That's more problematic for me. But if you've just simply used the wrong word because you didn't know otherwise, there's a conversation to be had there. And,
without a doubt.
A moment for education.
And I'm having those conversations. I wouldn't say there's not a single tasting I've done, but it's few and far between where I don't do this, where I'm doing a tasting and I'm talking about hogsheads and barrels and butts and port pipes and Madeira drums. And I purposely say that because those are typically the cask types being used in the whiskeys that I'm talking about. But I lay down the groundwork and then I say, you may remember me mentioning all these different hogshead and barrel, and I want you guys to know that there's no such thing as a barrel. That a barrel is actually a size designation of a cask, just like there's a hogshead, and then I bring up the Beatles, and right, Mr. H&K jumping through a hogshead of real fire, right? And so I do this in the effort to say, if you're going to use a generic term, you should maybe use cask because barrel is a size designation. I'm not going to get on you if you revert to barrel because you've been doing it for 10 years, 20 years, what have you. However, secretly, it comes from a place of it's a cask and they have size designations. And do I have to go over this again and again and again? But I come across and I say it nicely and I try to educate, and secretly I'm swearing on the inside.
See, yeah, I've given up the secret inside swearing as well. Life's too short.
Really?
We can discuss whiskey till the cows come home and never once have to go through all the different sizes of casks.
It's
Right?
true.
Just,
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, who gives a fuck? I get it, right?
Absolutely.
It's just
Absolutely.
whiskey. It really is just whiskey.
Absolutely.
And I will
Absolutely.
get over myself. But I do have bugaboos, and I do talk about them. But at any given point, let me just say this. I know you have things you want to say. But at any given point, I'm always respectful. And I always just want to educate people. And if it takes, wonderful. And if it doesn't, that's fine, because it really doesn't matter. My bugaboos aside, it doesn't matter. Do you like this whiskey? Yes or no? That's what matters.
Well, and so on one hand, I know we need to get out of this podcast. I have to run to the bathroom. My kids are about to come home for dinner. Like, there's a lot of things in play here. But I just wanted to circle back to something you and I discussed off air, which is, and just along this line of bugaboos and what words mean and how we use them. And I often talk about being both an industry professional and a hobbyist. And I know that you hate the use of the word hobbyist.
I do. I don't like it.
As we describe our own lives within this industry. And it's so interesting to me that when I use the term hobbyist, I'm talking about just my passion, my love, my collecting, my buying, my opening, my drinking, my sharing, right? Where I've got plenty of friends who are really into whiskey, who I love sharing my bottles with. I love it when they share their bottles with me. And I see us all on the same plane, the same level, which is that hobbyist level. Mm-hmm. And then there's Monday through Friday where I work on spreadsheets and I work on contracts and I work on cast selections that will go into different global releases of Single Cask Nation. No fucking part of that is hobbyist.
It's work.
None at all.
It's work as a business who
it's
were independent
all-
bottlers.
It's all industry all the way down.
Yeah.
But and so you and I had that conversation off air, just quietly, actually last Sunday, where you don't want to use that word hobbyist, and that surprises me because I see you hanging out with people. You know, when we're exploring the manzanilla that we talked about earlier, it's as a hobbyist. When we discuss the mezcals and the rums with Bruce, it's as a hobbyist. It surprises me that the word brings you such pain.
Because it gets back to people's use of the word Scotch. We've been a business for 10 years. A business, an independent bottler who's warehousing casks, who's finishing casks. And people have confused us for being a group or for being people who just do cask picks. And that's not the case. We're a independent bottler. We just happen to live in America where the language around that doesn't really fit what we do because we're based in the U.S. If we're based in Scotland and we're Cadenheads or we're Watt Whisky or we're Infrequent Flyers or Duncan Taylor or whomever, you're viewed as that is an independent bottler. But more than once, we've been referred to as a club, as a society, as what have you, and that's not the case. And so when this generic term of hobbyist is used, it makes me think of store picks, of which I have plenty. I've got
Yes, you do. Yes,
plenty,
you do.
and they're all wonderful. And I'm not trying to say bad things about them. But if you think about store picks, they're always bottled by the distillery for the store, for the group, for the individual. That's a bottled for, where we as an independent bottler are a bottled by. And there's a very clear distinction from that because it's also in our own livery. It's in our bottle, it's under our own label, etc. And so when I hear this term hobbyist, that again, getting back to that 50,000 feet away, is a type of term that can mean many different things to many different people. I like to get to that specificity where from a consumer standpoint, I am a hobbyist. I own hundreds of bottles of whiskey. I'm not going to give the number, but it's more than hundreds of bottles of whiskey. And I approach it because I'm passionate, because I love it, and because it is a hobby to me. It's one of those passionate hobbies, but when it comes to the business side of things, it is a business. And so I just am a fan of that clear and clean delineation. And so when I hear the term hobbyist, when it is imbued upon you and me, I pause a bit and I say, oh, wait a second. Or you're just talking about the stuff that I own and that I buy because I'm a fan? Okay, that makes sense. If you're talking about the stuff that I bottle along with Jason, the stuff that we're finishing with Jess and with Elijah, and because we're a business that is worldwide, no, that's not a hobby. This is something that feeds my children. This is something that feeds Jason's children, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just really like that delineation. And so when I hear the word hobbyist, it just sets me off a bit. Just like Scotch.
It sounds like you're
sets me off a bit.
It sounds like you're saying it's our word and we get to use it towards one another, but we don't like when other people use it at us.
That is 100% correct. Me and Yoni can hang out and call one another Heeb. You call me a Heeb, I'm going to have a problem with you, sir.
Is that true? I call you a Heeb all the time.
But yeah, I guess that's an interesting way to put it, Jason.
Man, I'm just laughing because I used to think I was the uptight one.
Huh.
How are we gonna? So first of all, you should tell people how to contact us. But then, how are we gonna clank our hikaris to get out of here?
So first and foremost, I need to pour one last mezcal into my glass. So I'm going to do that just now.
Not a glass.
That's a good point.
You talk about things that you and Haida say around your house. Ours is from The Good Place. When Janet says "not a girl," we say that around our house a lot. And so when you say, "I just got to pour a little more mezcal into this glass," not a glass.
Into this hikara. So this is another Clande, by the way, and this is an ensemble, and it's agave angustifolia.
Mm-hmm.
And geez, that's all it says it is. But I thought that this was a mix of Sotol and agave. I could be wrong. Anyway, if you want to get in touch with us, like the good Ian Bruce did, right, you could do what he did. You could just go to facebook.com and just search for One Nation Under Whiskey. You could send us a message that way. If you want to email us, we are questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. You could always tweet at us, though no one seems to really do that these days, which I'm kind of happy with because I hate Twitter. But if you're one of them...
Oh, it's coming, yeah. It's coming back. It's coming back.
Is it? You can reach out to us. We are at One Nation Whiskey. And then finally, if you're on the Instagrams, we are at One Nation Under Whiskey. So if you want to reach out to us, and I hope you do, you could reach out to us in that way. And then also, if you like the podcast and you want to give us a review, please do that through Apple Podcasts. We like our 5-star reviews. We'll take a 4-star review. And if you have anything below that, feel free to email us. Again, questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. Did I leave anything out, Jason?
not to my reckoning. I think you covered it. I was just sitting here as you were naming all of these ways to get in contact with us. The folks from down there are becoming some of our most voracious, wonderful, active fans, followers,
Getting
friends.
Such a listenership from down there. TM trademarked, which has been
down there is blowing up. I'm in love with our
Is it
friends
blowing
down
down or is it blowing up? I think it might
Well,
be
it
blowing
has
down.
to blow up, right? Because they're in the southern hemisphere, so it has to blow up to get to us in the northern hemisphere.
You're
If it
assuming
blows
heat
down,
rising.
they're going to get to a planet.
Okay.
I don't know how gravity works. I think about hashtag real talk. I think about gravity every single day. It amazes me that our friends down there, when the leaves fall from their trees, they fall in the opposite direction from the leaves on our trees.
You're hurting my head. This because of the centrifugal force of our disk.
Yeah. Right, gravity. It's been described for the last 250 fucking years. But
yeah, but it's
right,
different because
doesn't
we
make me
recently found
stop-
out, as you know, that the world is flat. So it's this.
Don't be a bad American. You're a good American. Continue to be a good American. Let's say positive things about vaccines. Get yourself vaccinated. We're all friends here. Let's get out of this alive.
All right.
Spoiler alert, nobody gets out of this alive. But isn't the support from down there absolutely phenomenal?
It's really been wonderful, and interestingly enough, it's not just from native down therers, but also from expat down therers, like our friend Colin Mayers, the pluralized
That's it.
Colin Mayer.
Yep. Former Glaswegian. Cameron talked about his grandfather coming from Glasgow.
Yeah, yep. So
It's brilliant, really, really brilliant. I'm sad that you're all so far away. I wish we could just come and see you so very easily, but we will one day. There will come a day.
one of these days. All right, Jason, it's time to make like a fetus and head out.
I'm gonna grab my bone dry Hikari, which has drunk as much mezcal as me.
Hikara.
Wait, what did I say?
He said Hikari, which sounds like,
Like-
some sort of drug that helps to take you away. Take me away, Hikari.
Hikari just sounds Japanese to me, so it makes sense I ended up at Hikari.
Yeah,
Let me Sabuka
drinking
myself
Mexican
with this
spirits with a
Hikari.
Japanese drinking vessel.
I love it. Cheers. David Feldner, you're a mensch. Much appreciated. Let's make a sound.
Let's make a sound. Let's see if it works. You ready? Here we go. You can't really clink a Hikara. It just kind of does a tap tap. Oh, wait,
See if
you
we
ready?
had two, though, we could make horse hoof noises.
You ready? Here we go. You ready? Or you could do this. You ready? How's this?
Oh, Morse code. Yep. SOS. Ship at sea.
No.
I'm on the way.
YYZ, Jason. It's a Rush song. Learn it. Love it. Know it. Live it.
Rush fans are loving this.
Cheers, Jason. And cheers, listeners.
Cheers, Joshy. Later, skater.